Hello everyone, we are live at the Newegg studios. We are with the guys from ASUS talking about the new 1080 Ti cards, including the new Poseidon 1080 Ti, the ASUS Strix, and the ASUS 1080 Ti Turbo. So this is JJ and Greg. You know JJ, he's one of the top experts, in my opinion, in the business for knowing anything about PC parts, PC building, and he brought some pretty cool systems here. Greg's, along with him from ASUS, going to talk about some of the cool new features of these cards, and why ASUS is special among the graphics card industry, but also like why this freaking rocks. Like there's some cool stuff that we've been working on.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and give us an intro of what you guys brought today?
Yeah, why don't you go through all that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely the focus is, a little bit earlier, we went through an entire stream that you guys can check out that covered, of course, all the performance, the ins and outs and features. But really what we want to do here is, the GTX 1080 Ti is such an exciting GPU in terms of high performance that we wanted to do an actual build, give you guys some insights in terms of if you want to build an awesome ROG kind of certified type of system. That's actually a new initiative that we've been working with industry partners on, and we wanted to put together a build that essentially is using some of these ROG certified components, highlight that brand new Strix GTX 1080 Ti, and so we've got a swath of different types of hardware here, and we'll kind of be answering some different questions from the users out there in terms of their DIY questions, Strix related questions, Ti related questions, things like that, between myself and Greg, and going through this actual build process. So in terms of the hardware, it's a pretty large swath of some pretty high-end suite hardware.
Yeah.
So when I go about a build, usually the first kind of two key things that I really think about is going to be the motherboard and the graphics card.
Right.
Very close to that is going to probably be the chassis. So for the motherboard, we've gone with ROG because, of course, we want to go with a flagship kind of really awesome board. So we're going with a new addition, which is the Code.
Right.
This is a little bit different than some of the other boards that people might be familiar with.
Yeah, how does that one slot in compared to like the Formula and the, like the Extreme?
Yeah, so it sits directly below the Formula and right above the Hero. So the Hero is a really popular board that we have, and the Code kind of was slotted in to be able to offer users really something that they loved about the Formula series, which was the overall aesthetic, right? It's got the shroud, right? It has the armor on the board, but the Formula is a bit more expensive because it features a custom integrated EK water cooling block for the VRM. And so there's a couple of other things like that that make that board even a bit more expensive, and so we wanted to kind of be able to give this hybrid solution, board that really's got awesome aesthetics.
Hand me that box, we'll get it out of the way.
Yeah.
As we go through all this stuff, we'll just get these boxes out of the way so we can see what we're doing.
So this board's Z270 based chipset, awesome overclocking. It's got killer audio, ESS Sabre built on board, ASUS ROG. In terms of the overall design aesthetic is monochromatic. It's going to go perfect with the look and feel. We've got 2 RGB headers on here. So pretty much everything you could really ask for, even integrated dual band 811 AC is built in with the board. So pretty much nothing that we wouldn't want to have in a high-end build. So it's going to have us all covered. Next up is going to be, of course, we've got the Strix GTX 1080 Ti part. We won't go into all those specifics that, of course, we covered in our previous live stream, but, it's pretty much the fastest, the quietest, and most overbuilt GTX 1080 Ti that you can get out there. And on top of that, it's even got direct connections for RGB LED strips built onto the card, 2 dedicated fan headers for more fan connectivity, and just, it's an awesome card.
And this is the OC edition, right?
Yep, exactly. So we upped it up to the next level just by picking the overclocked version of the card. So that's going to be, of course, our bedrock in terms of that. Now, the next item that I usually focus on for a build and that we have right here is actually going to be the chassis, because the chassis kind of really defines the look and feel of your system, right? It's going to tell you whether you're going with kind of like a small form factor box or you're going to go with something larger. And so here, we didn't necessarily go with like a super large chassis. It's kind of like in that mid-tower, a little bit larger than mid-tower category. And this is NZXT's Noctis 450. So it's a really interesting design chassis, but the thing that makes it unique is this badge that we have right here is ROG certified. So this is something that we kicked off in terms of industry partners a little while back, and kind of the initiative is that what we saw is that users that really loved ROG hardware wanted to see more complementary accessories. So stuff that kind of mirrored some of the subtle design touches that we put on ROG products like our motherboards and our graphics cards, and even like in our new peripherals, and see kind of some of those design staples, right?
Yeah, we actually have a, on our webpage, just we have a little landing page that kind of goes through all of the ROG certified products. And up here we've got cases by InWin, of course, and Deepcool and NZXT. You can see the Noctis 450 on there. And also memory. So we're going to use some of this memory in the build too, but you can see some of the memory that's available in the ROG certified line. So they've got the ROG look, and they're all. Is there anything else beyond the look that they are?
Yeah, for sure.
That they work with
You know,
ROG.
when kind of the ROG committee, for some of you that might not know, is that there is actually a committee that helps to define whether a product meets kind of ROG classification. And so one of the things that we asked our partners to look at when they went about kind of creating these ROG certified items wasn't just to kind of rebadge it and just put like an ROG logo on there, because that's not what ROG is, right?
Yeah.
We don't just take a Prime Series motherboard, make it black, and then it's all of a sudden it's ROG. That's not the case. There's a lot of design work. And so we asked them, can we look at putting in kind of supplemental design features, aesthetic touches? And so a great example of this here with the NZXT Noctis 450 is that it has kind of some of the imprint finishing, right, that you see on our motherboards and certain of our different types of peripherals. It also features fully integrated Aura RGB synchronization lighting. So they actually have 2 LED strips in here with correct connectivity cable to interface into our motherboard so that can all be synchronized. On things like the memory, though, that we're going to be using, which I'll give you an example right here. These are some awesome DIMMs. These are from Avexor. This is from their ROG certified line. These feature their plasma tube design, so they got a really distinctive kind of look and feel. These have a fully kind of imprinted finish on them, so they really look.
Yeah, that finish kind of looks almost like the Strix card. You know, it's very similar.
Exactly, but one of the really cool things that when you talked about like what are those additional things is that many users don't realize that when you buy higher performing memory, it features what's called an XMP profile, so an extreme memory profile. So these DIMM sticks, for instance, like these are 2666. If I install these, by default, they run at 2133. But of course, we want them to run at the faster speed. So normally you'd have to go into the motherboard, UEFI settings, and you'd have to select the XMP, set the value, and then have it run at that speed. But these actually feature an ROG profile. And the cool thing about that is that when you put that together with an ROG motherboard, it automatically enables it on post.
So just plug and play, and it's going to run at the maximum speed that the memory is rated for.
Right out of the box. So the user doesn't even have to do anything. So these are some cool touches that we've gone ahead and done to kind of evolve the functionality so that if you pair these type of products together, you get kind of an improved experience. So we've got the Noctis 450. We're also going to be use NZXT's Air series fans. There's some really beautiful, cool fans because they feature integrated diffusion on the actual fans themselves. So that really kind of gives them a soft, clean, distinctive look. And of course, they can be linked together. We'll be having 2 systems to control RGB here because NZXT does currently use the Hue Plus system. So we do have an NZXT Hue that's in there to be able to control our Air fans in sync with the Kraken X62, because that's actually what we're going to be using for cooling. So this is a huge, monstrous, closed loop water cooling solution, right? Supports 240 millimeter fans on there. It's got the really cool display that it's got a lot of options in terms of how you can go ahead and set it up for the look and feel. And it's going to perfectly match, of course, this system. So that's going to give us our cooling capabilities. And of course, at the heart of that from a CPU, we've got the latest generation Core i7. We've got the Skylake series of CPU. So definitely that's going to go perfectly with our GTX 1080 Ti part. So we've got, these are going to be rounding out actually not only the fans for the Kraken X62, but also for our exhaust and for the front intake. So that pretty much covers us on that side of the fence.
Now let's get that thing out of the way.
So for people who are just joining us now on Newegg Facebook or YouTube, I am Josh from Newegg Studios, JJ and Greg from ASUS, talking about some new cool products. Obviously, we're doing a build here. It's all built around the new ASUS GTX 1080 Ti products that are out there. So this is the new Poseidon air and liquid cooled. You see the 1/4-inch plugs right there, as well as the Strix 1080 Ti, aka the Beast, aka one of the best rated graphics cards on the market right now, if not the best. So are we gonna start throwing some parts in this thing?
So here you can see we've got those air fans I was talking about. You can see that nice diffusion screen, and kind of rounding out some of the last items that we've got right here. You can see that we've gone ahead and placed some of these pieces into the system already, just to make it a little bit easier for us as we go through some of this build, so we can make sure to answer some of your guys' questions. One of the most probably critical items you don't see in this build, but definitely you don't ever want to overlook, is the power supply. Because cool thing about this chassis is, one, you can see it's got this really clean, nice kind of matte gray finish, which really complements. I mean, if you look at the code board in there, it almost kind of
looks like it's almost the same color.
It's almost the same color, so it looks just awesome in terms of how they complement each other. But Josh, if you want to pass me over that power supply, we're rocking Seasonic's Prime. So this is an absolutely monstrous power supply. I mean, Seasonic did an amazing job in developing this power supply. It features a really high-end internal topology, great quality internal components. It's a fully modular design, and of course, it's got an optimized fan curve. So at low loads, we're not even going to hear this because, of course, we want to use those great fan controls that the motherboard has, even though we've got tons of cooling on here. I love high performance quiet systems.
Yeah.
So having a power supply that's going to be super quiet under operation and essentially silent under minimal loads is great. And we've got the fully modular cable set up to be able to go ahead and give us a little bit easier routing when we go through this.
Yeah, looks like you already got the cables ran and everything as well, so
Yep.
should be just plug and play.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty straightforward affair. For some of the cabling, you guys will see that it's already run in there. One of the cool things about a fully modular power supply design setup is that we've gone ahead and tapped cable mods. So we've got their premium alternating red and black cables.
Right.
So that's just going to help to add into the red and black motif that I want to be able to have, along with the gray, which is kind of our primary color that we're going to have here for the build. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting some of these items connected here and go through some of these points. As we've done in our last stream, if you guys checked it out for our build, some things that I always recommend that you guys, if you have on hand, it's going to make probably your build experience a little bit easier. I'm going to run through a couple of those points. So usually for me, I recommend 3 screwdrivers. It might seem kind of like overkill. Most people, when they probably go through a build, they use 1. Nothing wrong with just doing 1, but I find that depending on the way that you go about building, 3 of varying lengths in terms of the shank make your build experience much easier. So 1 is a long, actually shafted screwdriver. The reason why this is important is because sometimes you'll be in situations where if you've got a shorter shaft here, it actually bumps up in terms of internal parts of the chassis. It makes kind of screwing things in a little bit more complicated. So having something that's much longer makes it actually quite a bit easier in terms of getting into where you need to. So got 1 long one, 1 medium, and then I've got a smaller one, which is perfect sometimes for these small tip screws that you might have for like installing like the Mdot drives,
Right.
or sometimes the smaller thread like M3, M4 based screws that you're going to use for your SSDs and things along those lines. Another really handy item that I know you were surprised with last time is this guy right here. This is my Weehaw. This is my magnetizer. Absolutely love this thing. Makes it super easy. So, you know, a lot of times the bane of a builder is you pick up your screws, you get everything get ready, set, and what happens? Screw drops, right? And you're like, ah, man, that's crazy. So here, it's much easier. I can just go ahead and do this, magnetize the tip. If I need to demagnetize it, pop it back in there, and I'm good to go. So this is a really awesome little piece to be able to have.
My problem is I always assume that the screwdriver is magnetized, and I go to pick up a screw and it just, you know, falls right off, and I lost it.
And it just falls off, yeah. So that pretty much are really the main items that I usually recommend having on hand. If you really want to kind of make your process maybe a little bit easier, you pick up some magnetic screw trays. They're cheap and they're great sometimes to put that on your table, as you can put in kind of the screws that you need for different pieces. Makes the build process a little bit more straightforward. So probably the first thing I'm going to start to put in is actually going to be our SSDs. Now this system is going to set up a combination of Mdot and large capacity, but still high quality and high performing traditional SATA 6G SSDs.
Right.
So I've got 2 A-Pacer Panther, 480 gigabytes. So that's going to give me my like large primary kind of, let's say, storage volume for a lot of things.
Store all your games and software and everything.
For general things. Although we've got a big enough primary Mdot SSD that I still want my most frequently used applications and my most frequently used games. It might seem overkill, but you know, like for me, take for instance, I like doing a lot of photography. I shoot in sometimes raw and high quality JPEGs. I'm copying a lot of files back and forth. Even the music I listen to is high quality audio. So moving through a lot of bigger files, I want really snappy storage, even from my bigger kind of general storage. So these drives actually hit a really great balance of not being the absolute fastest type of drives, but giving us a bigger capacity, but the snappiness and reliability of course SSDs. For the M.2, I'm going to be using A-Pacer's 480 gig. This is their Z280. Based SSD, so this is an NVMe based drive, and that's going to go into the code. Now, one of the cool things you'll notice, if we can get a little bit tight in here in the code, is you can see with the shroud, there's always kind of some considerations. When you look at a normal motherboard, people usually see that the M.2 drive installs like maybe
right above where the GPU is.
Right above or right below, right? For ASUS, we always try to be considerate and cautious that some M.2 based SSDs can actually get quite warm, and they can even reach the point of thermal throttle. So you want to sometimes be able to manage the location so you can minimize heat. So in a board setup like this, well, where did we put the M.2? Actually, interesting enough, it's all the way at the bottom. So it's directly underneath the PCH, and it's right underneath there, and it's vertically installed. So instead of actually sitting flat directly like underneath the graphics card where there's going to be a lot of ambient pooling of heat, right? I can go ahead and just slide it right in there, and I also get the cross benefit of course, here in our chassis, right, we've got all this intake airflow. So what do we get? We get direct intake airflow that is going to flow directly over our vertically installed M.2 SSD.
Nice.
So we get a really nice combination of not only does it make the install process easy, but we get an optimal kind of cooling scenario. So I'm going to start popping these drives in here, and we'll kind of keep moving these things along. For those of you wondering as far as how we got things set up initially, the code board is already installed along with our 7700K. In there, the Kraken X62, the Hue Plus, and then these Air series fans. So we're gonna get our SSDs installed. And that's actually probably how I'd normally go about an installation in the first place is
Just
usually I mount the CPU first, right? Then I'm gonna put in the motherboard. And then depending on the amount of cabling, for anybody that's probably following a similar type of build, there's a lot of supplemental cables that you have to do with these Air fans for doing like in and outs to be able to control all of them. So I usually recommend as you kind of get these connected, do all that cabling as you go. Don't wait until the end because it'll become quite a bit more complicated.
Right. So now, did you say that you would install the CPU cooler on the on the motherboard before you install the motherboard?
For the backplate. For the backplate,
Right.
I usually find that a little bit easier, but of course, with this chassis, because you've got an open cavity here in the back, you can definitely go ahead and have direct
so you could
access to it.
put the motherboard in first, then do the CPU.
Yeah,
cooler.
so it's entirely up to you in terms of how you want to go through that.
And for people watching at home on Newegg, Facebook, or YouTube, feel free to shout out your questions to us. Jay Sherrod on YouTube asked, how does the M.2 screw into the motherboard?
That's a great question. Greg, why don't you go ahead and show
so
them
it
this
actually-
an included little piece?
Yeah, so there's an included bracket here, and so you mount the M.2 right onto the bracket.
Yeah, you still, the standoff.
So you still, you still need a little standoff and a screw. So you mount it like normally, and then this bracket has two mounting holes there, and it goes directly into the motherboard, kind of like this. So then it's sticking out just vertically from the board.
Skyscraper style.
Yeah, skyscraper style. So then, but like JJ was explaining earlier, that helps with have additional airflow around it to keep it nice and cool, because when these things are really running, they heat up. And if they heat up too much, they'll throttle back and you'll lose performance.
And I think that's only being done on, what is it, the Formula and the Tough Mark II right now?
Yeah,
because
so
mostly with the shrouds.
A couple of boards with the shrouds, but if you look actually any of the high performance ASUS series boards, so our Prime, Strix series, any of those boards, even though they might not featuring that vertical based design, we have still optimal placement for M.2. One is that we won't ever place that M.2 directly underneath the GPU. We'll place it one slot above, and then we always usually have a located M.2 all the way towards the bottom right hand side of the motherboard, usually like below the PCH, because that's more of a thermally isolated zone where we don't have to worry about that pooling of heat.
Yeah.
So on any ASUS series board, you're going to get really good placement for your M.2 based drives.
Cool. So for people who are joining us, we are talking about new ASUS 1080 Ti graphics cards. So we have in front of me, this is the Poseidon 1080 Ti. So obviously you see that it is air-cooled and liquid-cooled. So this is a 1/4-inch fittings up here. This is the new Poseidon. The last one was red. The new one is all ASUS
Monochromatic.
ROG, monochromatic. But for me, I mean, I love the new style of the boards. Obviously the Strix has been super popular, and now this is the first official ROG, even though it's the ROG Strix graphics card. It does have something super cool, and maybe we can plug it in later to take a look at it. It's the infinity window in front.
Yeah,
I really love the
I do have a photograph
in-win.
of that I could pull up if we want to
Let's
see
take a
that.
look at
Give me just a moment here.
that. JJ, Robert wants to know, what is the most important tip you could give to a first-time PC builder?
Oh, there's a lot of tips, but I will say the biggest one is take your time. Don't rush anything.
Yeah.
The other thing is that while it might seem really redundant and superfluous, actually I would say if you're willing to, and it might be the best tip is build your entire PC outside of your chassis, one complete time. And the reason why is that just having a sensible kind of framing of knowing I install this here, this is where this fan header is, this is where this connects to, and also being able to make sure that you can power on everything and pre-test it outside. You'd actually be surprised. There are some scenarios where you can have something that's called EMI, electromagnetic interference, where sometimes when you get everything installed, you might go to cut something on and you might not actually have your system power. Or you might have maybe, depending on certain cable routing or something kinking, you might have a short and something stops. So having that sanity check of getting everything externally connected, I think is one really good one.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's much easier to plug in those those tiny fan cables, especially up towards the top,
Yep.
into the board, and like the CPU power connection. That's always a hassle getting in
Yeah.
when it's inside the case. So for a first-time builder, if you can put it all together on the outside, you see how everything fits, how it all works, and you get to test everything out.
And it makes the process easier because now you've kind of already pre-done it and you visualize knowing that I need to connect this, this, and this, and this here before you go back in. One other, I think, equally important tip, and I see this now happen on so many builds. With our motherboards, we offer an exemplary level of fan controls, even on our entry-level series. And I see a lot of users make mistakes on maximizing the motherboard fan control setup. And a great example of this would be actually with this type of even setup. Many users are going to buy these nice, high-quality, closed-loop water cooling solutions. Many of them have some type of fan controller that's built into the CPU water cooling solution. So they'll have like a 4-pin splitter cable to it, or they might even have direct connections to plug in the fans or stuff like that, so users plug into that. And even the manual from that vendor will recommend that. Well, the reason why NZXT or any other closed-loop manufacturer does that is because they don't know which motherboard it might go on. But if you're buying an ASUS board, you definitely don't want to go that route because one of the key benefits that we have is that advanced fan controls for all our fan headers. So ideally, what we actually want to do is not use like splitters that might be built into the chassis or splitters that might come from these cooling solutions. You actually want to run your fans. So these fans, which we have two, would go to the CPU and the CPU optional headers on the motherboard. And then any of my chassis fans will go directly to the motherboard. And that's going to help to ensure that I have the best control, and also I can control them all from one single interface. And this is important. Even if you don't even want to use ASUS's Fan Expert software, all of our fan controls have now been implemented into our UEFI. So if you want to do full fan calibration, profiling, you want to set custom fan curves, you want to control even the inputs to where your fans respond to, you can do that all inside of our UEFI. And you can't do that with any other software solution from any closed loop water cooling solution.
Well, yeah, and if each one has its own individual, it's plugged into its own individual header on the motherboard, you can control each fan individually.
Uniquely, exactly.
Yeah, so you can say this fan is going to go up if the GPU temperature goes high, because this one's going right onto the GPU, right? And then you can have the other ones respond to different items.
Exactly, you nailed it. And that's one of the big problems, that if you go with something like even this chassis, it's really nice that NZXT includes it, but it's got this kind of fan splitter here, and I'm showing you as an example because it was kind of pre-wired in that way. But this would give you a disadvantage because everything's going to be linked to the same fan control.
Right.
Where what I want is, maybe I want these 3 fans, maybe I want those only to respond to my GPU temperature, right? And so I could set it up whether we use something like the Strix, because the Strix actually has 2 fan headers on it, or we use the chassis fan headers on the motherboard, we can have it set up in that custom way. The other really cool thing about this type of board that it offers to us, and I haven't decided yet on how we're going to wire this up, but we've got this really cool accessory that you were surprised about.
Yeah.
So this is pretty cool. This is our fan extension card, and this is compatible with a wide range of our Z270 series motherboards. So the really cool thing about this is that you can plug this directly into the motherboard, and I don't have to worry about running cables straight to the board, right? Maximizing the flexibility I have for cable routing.
So that would kind of replace the splitter that came with the case.
Correct, but
it'll still give you that same kind of control. So each one of the individual ports on there is still an individual input in the UEFI.
You got it. These are fully unique individual control headers, and they can use either DC fans or they can use PWM fans. They even have actually small, what are called thermosistor headers. So if you want to get a thermosistor and plug those to a temperature point in the chassis.
Right. That's like a thermometer, basically, that you can plug in and put it next to your intake, next to your outtake, your exhaust. Just to get your temperature readings.
Yeah, or like in this chassis, there's actually a lot of flexibility to have a lot of storage drives. So like me, I like doing photography, right? Maybe I've got like 2 4-terabyte drives. Big hard drives actually can get fairly warm. So maybe you put like a thermosistor on a hard drive, and then those fans, when the temperature gets to a certain point for the hard drive, the actual fans could ramp and make sure that that hard drive is always cool. So this type of little device is $20, connects to the motherboard, gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you could set up your different types of kind of fan control functionality and flexibility. So this is a really, really cool option, and it works bi-directionally. When you're in the UEFI, the fans that are on here, vice versa, can be controlled either which way. So it's a really nice little option.
So which boards does this extension come with? Is it just the ROG boards or the Strix boards?
In terms of boards that it will come with, only generally our highest end motherboards will come included with it in the box. But it is an accessory that will work on the vast majority of our motherboards. But you can always check. If you want to make sure, just go to the spec page for the motherboard, and if you see Fan EXT card support, then you know that it supports this.
Okay.
So for Dribble on YouTube asking, for front end air take, would you still use a fan splitter and plug directly into the motherboard, or would each individual fan be plugged into each 4-pin header? For example, I have an ASUS Z170 Deluxe, and there are a lot of fan headers. And I noticed when using a splitter, it became less efficient in terms of RPM of each fan. RPM.
That depends a little bit on your splitter and somewhat on the maximum fan speed. Generally, each header is rated up for a certain amperage, but it really depends on how you want to set up. One of the really cool things that we have on our motherboards, because we can do full DC and PWM output, is that you can use actually something. Let me see if I got one in here. Like one of these guys. It's my magic bag of holding guys for building. So this right here is like a PWM fan splitter cable. So this is pretty cool because our motherboards also give you a really unique perspective. This is another thing a lot of builders overlook, is maximize the investment you made in a motherboard like this. So you could have one single chassis fan header, right? So let's say chassis fan header 1. I could put this on chassis fan header 1. I make sure and set the UEFI to PWM, because that's the control signal, right? And now that's shared across each one of these lines, and then I'll connect the fans to that. And so maybe those 3 fans I want to have grouped with just that one control signal, but from one header. Now, whether one's better than another, that really comes down to the maximum amperage of the fan and whether you want kind of a combined setup. I usually find for something like this type of build, like these are all 3 front grouped intakes. I would probably want these mirrored, although I could have them uniquely addressable. If they're very high amperage fans that are usually in the category of like 2200 plus in terms of RPM, it might be better to have singly individual. But even if they're slightly reduced, they're still going to be quite good in terms of the performance.
Would you say, since we have the GPU here, would you have the center one be controlled by the GPU temps so you could have very specific cooling over that GPU?
You could go that route if you wanted to. I mean, definitely that's an option with the Strix.
That's a new thing with the motherboards.
Or
Like
with
actually
the motherboard.
having be able to dial in the GPU temps rather than having it be tied to the motherboard or CPU temps is.
You could definitely go that route, but I think
Definitely
actually
handy.
for me, I would probably do it even with all fans because I still might want to provide cool air to the back plane of the GPU. So it's really up to you, but the cool part is that you give that flexibility to the user by using a graphics card like this and a motherboard like this.
Yeah, sure. So going back to the guy who asked about the tips for the new users or for the new builder, number one thing that I think, once you get your stuff, pop this guy in there, the I/O panel. That's the number one thing people forget when doing a build. Just do it right when you get all the stuff. Just put that thing in there.
Yeah, because it's one of the only things that if you forget to do it, you're going to have to take out the entire motherboard just to be able to put it back in place.
Yeah, and then you have to just.
Although if you buy one of our nice higher-end boards, those higher-end boards now have the I/O shields pre-built in, so you can't forget to put it in. So that's pretty sweet.
All right, got a few more questions. So we're talking about the new ASUS graphics cards for people who are joining us.
The gray looks good too.
Yeah.
So close.
Jay Sherrod also has another question. I have the Strix OC 1080 Ti. Is the Poseidon card an upgrade? What is the real relationship between the two? How would you explain that?
Man, he should have watched our other stream. We went into
That's
all
right.
the details.
Actually, you can go back to unlock.newegg.com and check it out.
Yeah.
We did a stream earlier on ASUS channels at 12 o'clock. So JJ goes through a lot of that stuff. We demoed Poseidon with the water cooling system as well. So,
But we could answer
pretty
his
cool.
question now. I mean, basically, they have the same base clock, so they're kind of similar in that range. But what we found was the Strix. If you're going to do air cooled, the Strix was a better option. It ran a little bit lower temperature than the Poseidon, but they were still well within their operating
We
temperature.
had like 75 degrees.
Yeah, I think it was 75 with the Poseidon, and then it was like 65 with the
Yeah,
with
about
the
65 to about
Strix.
68 for the Strix, so definitely lower and even quieter operation.
Those the Unigen benchmarks.
Correct.
Pretty brutal.
You know, but from like a downgrade perception, it's important to understand that from a build quality, both of them, quick checkbox perspective, they both fully do our auto extreme production process, so it's fully robotic precision manufacturing, so they're identical in that regard. And the PCB and all the power components are identical, so they are significantly improved from the Founders Edition. So there's no difference in terms of like the board quality or the power components. It purely comes down to an aesthetic difference, the cooling differential between one being water and air and one being focused purely towards air, right? And then also some RGB. Both of the cards have the RGB connector that's built onto the card, which is a new item. But the Strix has 3 zones of lighting, right? Maybe, Greg, you want to show the 3 different zones of lighting?
We also
on
have,
this one,
so
yeah.
for people who are wondering, so you've got the 2 fan headers, and then you have, this is the RGB header right there. So it's the 12 volt, 4-pin version right up in front. So this is actually on the Poseidon and the Strix.
Yeah, and
it's
one
all
thing
controlled
is,
by Aura.
I do have a picture up that shows the LED on the side of the Poseidon, and it's a infinity mirror. So if you look at that, this is in a, let me zoom out so you can see it's an in-win 805 infinity case, and then this is the infinity mirror here. So it's kind of a slick setup. It's the first time I've ever seen an infinity mirror on a graphics
Yep,
card.
first time ever.
And it looks really cool in person. But then back to the Strix. The Strix has actually 3 different lighting zones, and there's a few lights on the front. Each one of these little cracks here, they all kind of light up with RGB. And then on the front here, like there, like that. Then we've got the Strix logo here and the Republic of Gamers logo there that lights up, and it's all RGB. And then it has the ROG logo here. And the Poseidon actually has this same exact LED as well. So you got a few different aesthetic differences between the two, but they're both similar in size, and when they're
Yeah, they're still beefy. This thing is heavy.
yeah, that one's
Like,
a
it
bit
has
heavier
got
because it's got the whole
a
water block
serious
in
copper
there.
water block in here.
Yeah.
You can see this is the Founders Edition 1080 Ti, so you can just see the difference between these things.
Yeah,
It is a beast. Also, these new cards are, this one, it looks like it's almost 2 slots, but it's not. So if you guys are at home watching, it's 2.5 slot, which means make sure you got clearance.
yeah.
But you can even SLI these things, which would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, two Poseidons in SLI would be a pretty insane setup, but I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
see one sooner or later at one of the trade shows.
Yeah, maybe maybe here one day.
Yeah.
The other thing to notice with these cards is well, actually, we were talking about the power delivery a little bit earlier and some of the features around that, but kind of want to also talk about the turbo a little bit. We have
Right,
there.
yeah, we've got the turbo here, and this one is, as you can see, it's a similar design as the Founders card. It's got the blower fan and whatnot, but it's, but this one also aesthetically, it's got our kind of monochromatic look. It's white and black with a little bit of silver on there.
Yeah, the little flex, I think if you get tied in kind of and show that I think the shroud a little bit,
Yeah.
we can show kind of the flecking that's built into it. I think gives it a really nice
Yeah.
kind of subtle, kind of premium look to it.
Yeah, it's almost like Meadow Flake, where when you turn it, you get like different little like reflections in there.
It's pretty cool. Well, one thing Doug on Facebook is asking about the ports. So the ports for the turbo, I believe, are the same as the Founders. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. It's we've
One
got
HDMI and 3 DPs.
Actually, it has 2 DPs and 2 HDMIs.
It should be.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, all 3 of the ASUS series cards are focused on what we call our VR-friendly initiative.
I gotcha.
So they all feature at least 2 HDMI ports, so you have a little bit more of a flexible setup in that regard.
Yeah, and so then the Strix and the Poseidon also have a DVI port as well.
So 2 display, 2 HDMI, and then 1 DVI, which
Yeah.
I guess some people still use DVI.
Yep. And for people that are wondering, the Poseidon has not yet been released on Newegg. It is coming very shortly. The shipment is on the way. The price is going to be just under around $800. Is that right?
I would say it's going to be, we'll say it's
Ballpark.
definitely in that or around that range. Definitely, it's going to be a little bit more than the current Strix OC, which I think the Strix OC is about $780 right now on Newegg. So yeah, I'll be looking at a little bit more than that.
So that's pretty crazy. So going from like $780 to $800, that's $20 roughly
Yeah,
for
it's-
a full water block.
Right.
If you're shopping for that, that's $120. Somewhere around there, depending on which one you get.
Right, yeah. So I mean,
For
if you know
really high-end one.
you're going to be doing doing a full water system, then water cooled system, then the Poseidon would be the way to go. It's just you can't beat it with custom setup unless that's what you really need.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is important to note that, for our system right here, we are water cooling, of course, the CPU because it's easy and accessible through a lot of these closed loop water cooling solutions, but you get really good thermal performance with this Strix card. If you guys go back and check out the overview, we talked about actually this really massive brand new heatsink that we have on the Strix card, including a brand new direct contact cold plate that we designed. It's called our Max Contact Design, which is actually mirror finish machine to be able to offer outstanding conduction and overall performance for the overall heatsink assembly. But if a user did want to take the Strix card and do water cooling, it's really important to note that we do work with a wide range of industry partners. So Fantex, EK, Bits Power, EK, Thermaltake all make Strix compatible water blocks. So that if you did want to strip the card down and put a water block on there, you could do that. And even Fantex currently has RGB enabled support for their water block for the card. So you don't even have to lose the kind of the RGB lighting element if you don't want to.
Right.
Sweet. So got a question from Gavin. What do you recommend for a beginning build for 1080 performance? Strix, the 1050 Ti. This is 1080p performance.
Oh, 1080p.
1080p basic gaming performance.
Beginner build for Gavin's little brother.
Yeah, I mean, GTX 1050 Ti and 1060 are really, really solid parts for that 1080p that kind of sweet spot. You don't really even need to go with Z270. You could go with one of really good B250 series motherboards. You still get improved audio design on those boards. You still get a nice, clean, monochromatic color aesthetic, even some RGB stuff if you wanted that. So you drop down the price quite a bit more, but you don't really compromise on quality and features, but you save yourself some money. You could go with like a Core i5 non-K version CPU and 16 gigabytes of like 2400 memory.
Yeah, I mean those B250 motherboards are actually really good for building basic gaming systems. If you're not going to be overclocking or tweaking everything, like this, all the parts that are in there that are important for gaming is the same as on a Z270, pretty much. Besides like some of the customizability.
Yeah, the audio will definitely be quite a bit better on the Z270 series motherboards, but you still get an improved audio experience. But I think for
But the cost savings is pretty big between a Z270 and B250 board.
For sure.
For a beginner board.
Yeah, so I think that would be a really good option if somebody's kind of picking that. And then, there's quite a number of different choices, in terms of chassis and power supply. But, a lot of kind of budget builders spend a little bit more than they probably should. Target going something like a 550 watt, bronze 80 plus, something like that. Like Seasonic's got tons of them. And, that kind of, I think, rounds out that kind of.
Yeah, I'd say make sure that it has at least a bronze rating, because you don't want you might get a power supply that's rated at 550, but that's like the max it can hit. But once you get to those bronze ratings, they have higher efficiency. So it still might be a 550, but when it's hitting 550, it's way more efficient. So it's less likely to fail. So getting a bronze rating, bronze, silver, gold, or what's the biggest one now?
Titanium. Yeah, and that still gives you actually tons of headroom. If you actually check your power consumption, even for a very high-end system, nominally in most situations, you're probably looking about 375 to about 450 watts of power draw. So if you have to consider that even if you buy a 550, although you're going to have, of course, some reduced efficiency, you still have overhead. So considering that you can't overclock on a B250 enabled system, you don't really have more power consumption to ratchet up to. That really actually leaves you quite a bit of healthy room.
Yeah. Personally, for me, I would not even. I'd always go with the overclockable CPU, unless it's like an ITX system and you're just constrained by the size of the CPU cooler.
Right.
Then there's no where to go, no additional place for the heat. So I got some more questions here. How important is it to have Thunderbolt 3 on a motherboard? That's from Omar on YouTube.
So that's a really interesting question. So ASUS's stance has been that Thunderbolt is a really impressive technology for performance. Of course, it's become a little bit less impressive in terms of its total throughput because of USB 3.1, which is now on the latest generation Intel chipsets. That being said, Thunderbolt does offer some distinctive design benefits, but because it does actually increase the cost from a motherboard production standpoint, the route that we've decided to take is actually enabling Thunderbolt through an add-in card. So we actually have a Thunderbolt EX3 card that allows you to just drop in Thunderbolt directly onto the motherboard. So many of our Z270 series motherboards and even our X99 series support this type of feature. So you could pick it up and just drop it in and just dependent on your usage model. If you feel that you need Thunderbolt, then you can go ahead and buy the card and you now have that latest generation I/O standard. But if you don't need it, you're not necessarily paying for a spec on a board that could actually increase it by quite a bit that you don't necessarily need. But ASUS is really the only industry motherboard manufacturer that offers that type of flexibility across a wide range of their boards.
Sweet. So some more questions about the Poseidon 1080 Ti this time. So wondering about the path of liquid through this model. What kind of flow, what is the restriction like? Also, someone asked, does this require hard tubing? Is this a pure hard tubing? They see a lot of custom builds that are out there that are super fancy with these really hard loops.
No,
are your
totally.
thoughts?
Yeah, you could totally just, you know, in our basic setup, we showed using just standard soft tubing. Actually, for me,
Actually, we have it set up with soft tubing right here. I don't know if you can see it back there, but you get that shot. I don't know.
yeah,
You
for
see
me
that,
personally, I
but,
prefer soft tubing. I find it's much easier to work with. You know, hard tubing, or even if you go to glass, it's absolutely beautiful. It's great, but it's unless you're a seasoned veteran, you've got a lot of time to be able to take towards doing the bends, redoing it over and checking a lot of things. It can be very time consuming and it can be quite expensive. It's a considerable increase already from water cooling to be able to do that. And there is some limitation on the hardware support. There are more and more companies that are making more specialized fittings, but even the fittings that you need for hard tubing are different than your traditional compression fittings that you're going to use. And actually, I find that standard compression fittings are easier to work with. So the card can use both. So totally up to you. But in terms of the overall performance too, when you talk about flow and different things like that, it's not an issue. This is going to pretty much be on par with the same type of performance that you will see from a discrete full coverage water block.
Fair to say like the 780 one?
Well, it's actually an entirely new design. This is a brand new solution that we have, so it's going to be quite different than even our previous generations. But the performance in comparison to current kind of full coverage water blocks is fairly comparable.
That's right. So basically, it's a full water block, but then with an additional fan cooling solution on top. And these are G1/4 fans that are on, or the threads on here, so it can work with any of the normal standard threaded.
Yeah, it's pretty universal. So
Yeah.
it works with a lot of different manufacturer settings. Actually, we have this exploded view here if you want to see the inside of
Let's take a
the
look.
Poseidon. So you can see here's the fan cooling solution with the radiator here, and below that is the water block here with the copper, and you can see the intake and output there, and it looks like just kind of loops around like that. But yeah, and then also you can see here these are the fan connections and the 4-pin RGB connection as well. Since we were talking about that earlier, you can kind of see it. You can see it all laid out in this view.
And that's the 12-volt 4-pin RGB, so it's pretty much standard. Works with almost any of the RGB strips that are out there. Interestingly, I don't believe that the NZXT is 12-volt. Isn't that a 5-volt system?
I'm not sure, but their LED strips are compatible with our system, although they've kind of designed them to work optimally with their Hue-based controller setups. So this chassis, though, we don't have to worry about that because, as we noted, it's already integrated with Aura-compatible lighting that directly connects into our motherboard, so we're good to go there.
Sweet. So for people who are joining us, I am Josh from Newegg Studios. We got JJ and Greg here showing off some new cards, as well as demoing their new system. JJ's building up a ASUS 1080 Ti Strix build using which motherboard is that? Is that the Z270 code?
Yes, this is the
Z270.
maximum 9 code.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it.
It's beautiful. And let's do a rundown on the parts real quick again. That's the NZXT. Which case is this?
So
the Noctis 450, I think.
Yep, you got it. Noctis 450. I've got Maximus 9 code in there. Kraken X62 closed loop water cooling solution. We've got two A-Pacer Panther SSDs. We've got another Panther Z280 Mdot2 NVMe based SSD. For the fans right here, we've got NZXT's Air series fans. We've got 120s and 140s to be able to kind of split out across what we need in terms of the setup. Directly behind this shroud, we've got a Seasonic Titanium series Prime 850 watt PSU. For the memory, actually, that's about the next item that I was going to drop in. I think I'm going to probably go with these Avexer RG certified DIMMs. I think they look really cool, and they've got the plasma tubing in there. Another option though that would look also really nice though is that we do have a G-Skills Trident Z RGB series memory. This is actually fully RGB controllable as well, and they feature kind of a nice diffusion.
We have it actually lit up back here on this back system. You can see those glowing. That is on the ASUS Strix motherboard. So, and no, those things look great.
You can see them cycling through the colors.
Yeah, just
that looks really
standard.
nice.
Yeah, and so
cycle.
you can entirely control those. And there's also a set of DIMMs that we used for our previous live stream. I think I got one right here that actually would also, I think, look really well for our red and black kind of setup that we've got. These right here are from A-Pacer. These are their blade series. So you can see they got this nice little blade there, and then I've got this really cool kind of light bar effect with red also. So that would also look, I think, really good for our setup. But because we want to go with this kind of RG certified vibe, we're going to go with those DIMMs. So I'm going to pop those in there right now. And that's also another tip, is that a lot of users kind of wonder about which is the right channel to pick if I'm using only 2 DIMMs versus if I'm doing 4. 4, it's easier because I just fill all the memory banks, right? But generally, you do want to reference the motherboard manual. The motherboard manual will tell you exactly which banks are the optimal banks.
Because it can vary with different like chipsets and things.
Correct, depending on the motherboard design. Most of the time, it's not usually the internal bank, so the bank that's closest to the board. It's actually usually the next bank over, and it's alternating. So on ASUS boards, you'll see that there's black and then there's gray. Each color defines a certain channel, so channel A and channel B. So you want to make sure that you have the 2 DIMMs in either one of those respective channels. And that will help to make sure that you're getting that kind of best memory experience. One also tip that I will give to a lot of users where we see them make a mistake is when you go applying your torque or your pressure to your cooling solution, be very cautious to not over torque. The main reason being is that if you put too much pressure sometimes between the CPU socket, and then the cooling solution, it can actually cause memory initialization issues. And you might actually have to relieve some of that pressure. This is most common in sometimes high density memory configurations, especially like an X99. There's too much pressure pin contact because users are kind of really cranking things down.
On the CPU block.
Yeah, and sometimes memory channels drop, or like they go like one DIMM is missing, so they think the motherboard is bad or something like that.
But it's just that they did the screws too tight on their CPU cooler.
Correct. So you just want to be cautious in making sure that it's really kind of applying that kind of finger tight, where get it to finger tight, maybe a smidge from there, and that's it. You know, don't worry about putting much more than that.
Right. So we got a few more questions here. Daniel on YouTube is wondering, is there a way to adjust the brightness of the LEDs on the motherboard?
In terms of our the Aura software, that's not something that we've yet formally integrated. You can kind of play around with the settings in terms of the kind of saturation level, which is a way of kind of softening the level of brightness. But on a motherboard, as we generally, on pretty much almost all our boards, we use some form of diffusion. I consider that it's a really nice balance that the LED is not super bright in the first place. So I don't feel like you would really want to bring them down too much more, because I feel it would take away from the look. But it is something that we are looking at in terms of giving more direct control in terms of the brightness level, but you can, like I said, control that a bit through the saturation option.
Okay. And for Unleaded Fuels, also on YouTube, wondering if ASUS's Aura Sync will work with other graphics cards from other manufacturers that have RGBs.
So as of right now, no. We only support ASUS series graphics cards. What ASUS has done that no other company has done is that we have released a full API though for our ASUS Aura initiative. This is something that we're offering to all our partners over time. So essentially, or any industry company, that if they want to integrate support to allow for that synchronization and control to work, then they will have that ability. But right now, ASUS Aura is the most extensive RGB control ecosystem. I mean, it controls chassis lighting, LED strip lighting, cooling solutions, memory, SSD lighting like we've seen in other chassis, keyboards and mice. So it's really, there's no, even new fans that we've seen from other partners. So it's really the most extensive controlling option when it comes to PC-centric lighting.
Yeah, no, it's pretty solid.
You want to pass me that Strix card?
Yeah, let's get this thing in there.
A question from Adam, also on YouTube, is the PCB, going back to the graphics cards here, for the Strix and the Poseidon, is it the same, or has it been adjusted? Is it switched up for the new card?
So Greg knows the answer to that question.
Do you want? I did ask you about that earlier, didn't I?
It is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no difference in it. The PCB, VRM, they're both 10-phase plus 2, IR power stages, SAP production. They're pretty much exactly the same. Differences between the cards are purely in the thermal design and the aesthetics.
Yeah, which is about 10 degrees, so, and $20.
Yeah.
So the Strix OC version was about mid-60s when we ran a stress Unigen test before.
Yeah, it was like 65 or 68, around there.
Yeah, and then this one was about 75-ish.
Just on air.
Yeah, just on air. Then when we put it on the liquid, it went down to...
It was 45,
like
46?
Yeah, in that range. It was close.
You could use as an air conditioner in your house.
Yeah, compared to the Turbos edition, we were almost close to a 40-degree drop.
That is pretty crazy. 40-degree
Yeah.
Celsius.
Yeah,
So-
for reference, this is the turbo.
not
The turbo was the
Fahrenheit.
one running at about, what, 84? 80,
yeah,
around
that's right.
84?
And at
Yeah.
about
So, yeah.
90, you're going to see thermal throttling. Is that right?
Well, throttling kind of it depends on how you interpret thermal throttling, because the throttling is already happening from the GPU boost clock. So it's just getting closer to that base clock of what NVIDIA defines, right?
Yeah.
So a quick note for you guys, if you guys are following the build here, we've got the GPU installed. I'm going to finish getting some of the screws in there and then one of the plates. But with this chassis, if you do want to have a little bit of a larger card like our Strix card, which is a very beastly graphics card in terms of its overall size, you're going to want to make sure to remove a couple of the hard drive trays that are optionally in there. So that you can make sure to fit that. Now you'll still have the option that you can still have trays in there. So if you still wanted to put some mechanical drives or have one of the bays for an NZXT, it's not like you can't fit that in there, but you'll at least need to remove one of them so that you can fit the card in fully into that respect.
Yeah, and also these new motherboards, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the spacing is different between the lanes on the PCIe slots. So there's an extra slot in there, which makes doing SLI much easier. But actually, did you bring the bridge? The
Oh
new
yeah, I
ROG
do have the new bridge. So this is the new ROG SLI bridge. Make sure I got it right side up this time because last time it was upside down. But this is actually it's got RGB LED in it. So this will work with our Aura Sync system as well. So you can set it up to where these light parts here they all light up, and you can set it so the colors will match whatever you've got going on in your system. So if you've got color cycling, this will go along with the cycle, or if you just have a solid color, it'll go along with that. And the look is, I mean,
Perfectly complements the
yeah, it
cards.
perfectly complements the Strix or even the Poseidon card.
Yeah, I think actually
So-
even it would look if
If you pop that in
like
there.
that. That's
And it works with the case too.
It looks
Since
good with the case,
since
yeah.
This is the ROG certified case. It's got a similar color scheme.
Yeah, and this isn't just black, right? It's like a
No, this
slightly
is actually like
slight gray.
it's like a matte kind of like almost like a gunmetal.
Yeah.
It goes really well with kind of the gunmetal look that we've got with the shrouds on the boards. So another kind of quick tip for you guys that are kind of following this similar type of build. If you notice, I removed actually all the I/O plates right here for that, and that just makes it easier because sometimes when you're installing these cards, one of the top or the bottom, sometimes it catches the card, and so sometimes it gets a little bit trickier. So what I tend to remove is I usually remove 3 to 4 of those all together, makes the installation of the card much more straightforward, and then after the fact, I'll just slide the ones that I need back into place.
So going back to the bridge, we got a question from Mr. TJ. What bridge would be needed for SLI 1080 Ti Strix? A 2-slot or 3-slot? There's a number of models out there. Which one is technically the right one?
It depends actually on the motherboard spacing, but
Yeah, I
in most
mean
situations,
this one would work with
Correct.
most ROG motherboards.
So
Actually,
because
probably
the
with all of
spacing,
them.
the spacing is pretty uniform. It's and which one is
Yeah,
that?
because
The
this
2-slot?
one, well, this is the new SLI bridge, but
It's the space. It's the space between the actual.
Yeah, so I think it's, I don't know, is it 3? Can you hold it up there?
Yep.
To see how
Yep.
far it goes?
yeah. So if you see, what they're referring to is that depending on the motherboard design layout, there's sometimes a different level of spacing for the PCI
Right,
slots.
so those are
between
like-
the card. Correct.
Those are spaced by 3, so there'll be
Correct.
3
Yeah.
in between.
And so there's different cards that are produced depending on your GPU configuration. So that's made available to you. There's also bridges that are included with the motherboard as well. So between that, you've got multiple options. But for most users, that is going to be your correct bridge to pick.
Yeah.
For this Strix card, though, like I said, you need to have more spacing on your motherboard as well as in your bridge because of the increased size.
Sweet. All right, and we got a question from Kevin. What is the temp threshold for the Poseidon? Temp threshold for the Poseidon.
Well, on all NVIDIA GPUs, you actually define the kind of the temperature threshold that you want within the actual GPU tweak utility. By default, it's always defined by NVIDIA at 84 degrees. So the card doesn't hit that under air, and it doesn't hit that underwater. So in most respects, you're never hitting actually any thermal junction point or a temp threshold point where it's going to begin reducing the GPU boost clock. You actually have to look more at the power target consumption as well as the target frequency and if you're applying more voltage. So that is something that's, of course, adjustable by you, though. So you ultimately define what that target temperature is that you want to have the GPU boost work as.
Sweet. And so for people that are wondering, yes, all these components are available on Newegg.com. I believe the SLI bridges as well.
Yes, those just did recently start shipping out, so you should be
Yeah.
able to see those online.
And the Poseidon is not yet available. It's going to land around $800 and land sometime soon, but it's not live on Newegg yet. But check out the links on
probably within the next 2
unlocked.newegg.com.
weeks. I'm sure by the end of May, should be available.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you know any word on whether some people are wondering, is it going to be readily available or is it going to be constrained? Or are they going to be waiting?
You know, it's a very customized card. It does require a large amount of precision manufacturing and assembly. So similar to our high-end RG cards in the past, that does affect our yield and our overall production ability. So in that respect, you know, that is something that you kind of have to account for a bit. But you know, we are trying to target to have a healthy inventory for the launch of the card.
Sweet. Pat Murphy on Facebook wants to know, are there options for those of us who do not like the lighted components?
Of course, turn it off.
Turn it off.
All our ASUS Aura RGB options, if you don't want to run RGB, there's one button, click off, and nothing will turn on. And that even includes the motherboards by default. Even if you've never installed the Aura software, you can go into the UEFI. There's a lighting option, turn it off. Personally, like I said, I think they look great, you know, in terms of adding just some soft accenting. But if you want to keep everything super flat, super black, go for it, turn it off, and you're good to go.
And of course, there's always like the turbo card. It has a less aggressive design as the Strix and the Poseidon. And
Although it still does have a small
it does have an LED, but it's just a white LED. Here,
Well,
the
I feel
lights
like
at the
white,
ASUS
maybe
logo.
I think the issue that people are having with the RGB just
It's just like
unicorn
the crazy-
explosion. Like
the
this thing,
yeah,
we're
like that
talking, we're
thing.
calling it the,
Yeah.
what'd you call it, the
Scooby-Doo, but
Dream
see, your
Machine?
system is already using multiple colors. For me, trying for my builds, I always try to focus on a singular color palette, so I don't ever feel like RGB, you know, and this is something we talked about last time. I don't
It's
know.
like the option to do any color you want.
Exactly. I don't
You
know
just have
almost
solid.
any users that ever use RGB in their respective actually running like rainbow colored configurations.
You see it a lot on
like-
Reddit. You'll see, especially with the NZXT fans.
Like with
these
the
things
animations
just-
and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the word
yeah,
control comes to mind there.
Yes, big time.
But that being noted, most users tend to focus on singular color tones. They focus on red, blue, orange, purple, you know, and it's just about highlighting that. And equally, if you want to do white, you could just do white also. So
Yeah.
it's really the choice is up
That's
to
what,
you.
that's what I would say. If you have a scenario where you have a case that has like a window or nice tempered glass on it,
Yeah.
you know, you want to have at least some lighting. And
Yeah, it's,
usually you
it's
can
nice
make
to
it
have
be
at
white.
least like, you know, one LED strip, you know, across the top, just shining light on the components. If you've got like a big window and you can,
The truth,
you
I
can
mean,
see all the
motherboards-
components, you know.
When the motherboards with LEDs first launched, they were fairly dim.
Yeah.
The latest ones are very bright, and the graphics cards, you have enough light in there, assuming you don't have just a smoked tempered glass panel
Yeah.
where you can barely see anything. But just the lights typically on a motherboard and graphics card will be enough to give you some illumination to actually see
Right.
what's going on in there. I think personally it's a shame if you don't have it lit because the motherboards these days look so cool.
Yeah, they're all kind of like a work of art now. Like the motherboards, the GPU design, even the memory design. I don't know if you saw the ones he put in there, but those are pretty cool looking. And even the, I mean, I can't wait till we turn this on and we can show the part of the NZXT CPU cooler that's on the CPU because that lights up. It's got a really cool design.
Yeah, it's interesting that ASUS and NZXT at the same time did the diffuse look on the
Right.
their LED effects, and I think that's where the trend is going.
Yeah.
Like in this,
Like
the
softer-
build back here,
just
it's the
softer
Strix.
lighting.
Yeah, it's really soft. It's not as insanely bright or gamery or.
Yeah, I think, well, even that quote-unquote gamery tone, I don't think there is a true-unquote gamery tone. I think it's what people apply, because for us, we've never tried to go a gaudy perspective. We've always
for sure.
defined our gamery look as being something that looks clean and stylized. I think NZXT, I give them a lot of credit to follow a similar ethos as us, is that what they're trying to focus on in a lot of their designs is about a refined and really clean and stylized design aesthetic, and that's why you have this kind of complementary look and feel. So I think the reason why they did diffusion on their fans is very similar to why we did diffusion on the lighting on all our motherboards, because we think it looks nicer and it looks cleaner.
I would agree. Mick on YouTube has asked a number of times, is ASUS going to make an ROG Swift ultra-wide curved monitor 1440p IPS G-Sync HDR?
So HDR is of course a question
just say
mark.
pass.
Yeah.
You know, we always get these people that always spout off specs on every single type of monitor configuration they want.
Yep.
It's very complicated to incorporate lots of new technologies with
Well,
the
we have one that
displays.
meets all those except for the HDR,
which
right
is a
now.
big one,
And
because-
that's the new one. So, and we're just kind of rolling those out. We showed some at CES,
Yeah.
and I don't think any of them are available yet. The
Yeah,
HDR
they're
model.
My
not.
God, the CES demos were fantastic. And this is one of
Yeah.
those things that people online are watching and they're looking at the monitors and going, Yeah, I don't see a difference.
Yeah,
It's
but
because,
in
you can't
person,
see it.
it's
You
like,
literally
that's
can't see it over
crazy.
your monitor. But the
They-
demos were incredible.
The HDR is very important to understand, though, because even though that sounds like one spec, it's the most complicated spec to implement.
Yeah, there's a few different, it's kind of like Blu-ray and HD DVD. There's a few different players in the game with different,
Yep.
different
Yeah, there's different
specs,
specification
yeah.
support. So like in the CE, you have HDR10, you have Dolby Vision. There's different standards, but beyond that, all HDR, it's actually about contrast. And one of the key issues that you have is driving such ultra high levels of luminosity requires very, very complicated panel design. Even under the highest performing televisions that exist on the market, you cannot run sustained peak brightness for a very, very, very long periods of time. If you think about it, when you game, you might be gaming for how many hours? You might game for 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe more. I know people that play games for 6 hours.
I was watching my friend stream for 4 hours and 45 minutes the other night.
We're getting close. We're getting
Doing that,
Yeah, we were.
doing that in a monitor is a whole nother ballpark. So how we have to be able to design the monitor and be able to have it reach peak brightness, hold the brightness, which is what enables HDR, requires a lot of complication aspects to the backlighting, cooling, and a lot of other pieces to it. So rest assured, as we showed at CES, we're committed to HDR. We think it's amazing technology, and we're going to have it. We'll have the PG series monitor that has HDR, and we have a PA series monitor that will also have HDR. But as far as whether you're going to find that key monitor that will have that
The
spec in the way
curved
that you
ultra
want
wide
it
and all
everything
that.
else, that's going to come when we best feel, especially on an RG product, only when we feel that we can really offer, I think, a version of it that is in alignment with what users are looking for. Right?
For sure. And so there's a number of questions about, say, like a ROG and MATX, like the Gene from last time, ITX boards from AMD, Matrix. Basically, the answer is ASUS can't talk about upcoming stuff, even if there would be products. So yeah, I want to know too, but they can't release any of that info now.
Yeah, that's kind of a question for Ian. I don't know if people can see him in the comment section. He's back at HQ answering some of these questions. I can see as
For
Thomas,
any of
he's
those,
the guy to
Ask-
answer that
ask you,
question.
yeah.
Yeah.
for any of those under-designed products, we're working hard at always looking at the market to release new types of product offerings. I definitely will say for some of the smaller form factor based products like mini and micro, one of the challenges that we have is that it's about market demand. So sometimes we got like a vocal minority. So like people say like, oh, we really, really want to see this board. But the problem is that it might not be of sufficient quantity for us to go about the production. And it can be quite challenging because we really want to serve the community in that regard. And we've done probably more commitment to smaller form factor boards. Like there wasn't any vendors that did Gene class micro ATX. The impact boards are unquestionably the highest performing mini ITX boards that have ever been made. But they require usually a factor of almost 2x the development time of any other motherboard. So that's a very big resource commitment from us. And we've been very busy designing a lot of other motherboards. So it becomes that challenge. So what we do is, we pay attention in forum groups, we pay attention to social media channels. And if we keep seeing people asking, it's something that we always go back and discuss with our product management team. But as to whether there's anything guaranteed coming down the pipe, it's nothing to communicate right now.
Confirmed. ROG STX motherboards. So another thing about that, like the impact. The impact was an incredible little ITX motherboard. It just takes a while also, though, to figure out ways to get all the quality and pieces that people expect from that line into an itty-bitty little form factor.
Yeah, we do
so you
have
don't want to release a product that's half-baked too early.
Yeah,
and we
takes
do
time.
have the Strix mini ITX, the Z270 mini ITX
And that's
board.
an awesome board. I mean, it
Yeah.
still has an RGB header. It has dual Mdot 2 on the front and the
Yeah.
back. I mean, we did that killer Manta build.
Exactly. Go back if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube. Go check it out. We did a live Manta build, and that thing hit. God, what was it? 5.1.
Yeah, I think we got up to 5.1 gigahertz. Yeah, so we showed. I mean, you
Using
can
another
still
NZXT, yeah.
that board really doesn't have very, very little limitations. It's not an impact, but it's still an amazing class board. So we're never going to leave you high and dry, in terms of not offering at least offerings within each form factor. But as far as whether that's that specific SKU that you want, that it becomes challenging.
For sure. So a lot of questions about actually, for people who are joining us, I am Josh from Newegg Studios. We got, from the guys from ASUS, we got JJ and Greg. Obviously you recognize these guys from previous streams, always dropping by to launch new stuff. The big thing that's launching really soon, not quite today, is the Poseidon 1080 Ti. This is the air-cooled and liquid-cooled graphics card. Now the price for this, for everyone who's asking, is going to be around $800. It's not released yet, but it's being skewed up currently at Newegg. And for Francisco, who's asking if it's going to be available in California, We are in California. ASUS is in California.
We're in California
Pretty much
right now.
everyone is in California right now.
I know there's at least 2 Poseidons in California.
There are two, yeah. We got them all. So yeah, no, it's Newegg's based out of California. So
Yeah, and
same day shipping. No, that's not right. Yeah, you'll be able to get it soon. You can
Depends
drop
where you
by
live.
the
If he's in
Hybrid
Southern
Center and do will
California.
call
Yeah.
once it is available if you are in the LA area.
okay,
Yeah, and then we
guys,
got the 1080 Ti Strix Edition,
which are available right now.
which are available right now in the case here. So we're actually using that one in this build. And like we said before, similar performance with the Poseidon, or similar design, I guess, except for the cooling. The Poseidon's built to be in a liquid-cooled system, but you can still use it air-cooled. But the Strix 1080 Ti is probably our best air-cooled system, or best air-cooled GPU that we have available right now. And actually, we're using the OC edition, so this one's even overclocked a little bit. So it's
So we have breaking news right now, guys.
breaking news. What happened?
Ian from ASUS is confirming on Newegg Facebook right now that the Poseidon should be available by June 1st.
There you go. So
Okay.
not too distant futures. So
Okay.
quick note right here, guys. So I've got the GPU installed. I've got my power LED, my PCI power leads connected. I've got the, of course, CPU and the motherboard power, memory installed, and everything else there. So I'm going to do a quick test fire, see if things cycle on. From there, the next thing is I'm going to probably throw on our fan extension card to get a more optimal route to make sure that I can manage and control these series of fans. But this will give us a quick little primer to kick on. And this is usually something actually I recommend as you go through the building process. Try to find a couple of key points where you do a quick test power on post to make sure that the cabling and the power sequencing and for the devices you have connected are kind of all coming on. Really the golden rule that you want to have is that you don't ever want to close your panels and then have that be the first time you turn on the power button.
Yeah, put it under your desk, get everything hooked up, and
Yeah,
sit
yeah.
down and be like, okay, ready.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
it's not working. Let's take it all apart.
You know,
You got your gunners on. You're
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
ready to start gaming.
that the golden rule that's really put out there is you never put your side panels on until you're happy with the build. Once you're done with that, then you can put everything on and then you can go from there. So let me go ahead and get power on here. And
So while he's hitting it up for David on Facebook, this is beside a water-cooled graphics card. It is water-cooled and air-cooled. This is the model right here. So it is basically the Strix OC version. So same PCB, same overclock.
Right.
But it is with dual fans and then the fittings. So you can run the card as you normally would and then hook it up to your water if you don't have it yet. Or if you want to do a full loop, you can do hard tubing, soft tubing, anything you want. This is a actually improved model over last year. What were you saying, JJ, about the orientation of the tubing? The previous Poseidon
yes,
had fittings that
exactly.
came straight up, right?
So yeah, exactly. They weren't optimally suited. I mean, you could still do an SLI configuration, but here we've set them up to be vertically oriented as opposed to horizontally oriented. So that's just going to give you more flexibility so that if you want to go with an SLI type setup, you can do that more easily. Right.
Yeah, and so again, for Francisco, who says, thinking about the price, roughly around $800.
More than 800. It's
Yeah,
it'll
like
be-
I said, it'll be north of that. Just
Yeah.
keep it tuned to Newegg, and you'll be able to see.
Yeah.
I've gone ahead and kicked it on here, so you guys can see a quick little initial version of how everything is sequencing on. So you can see we've got these really nice, cool, like I said, diffused fans from NZXT. Now, once we get the Hue Plus all installed and configured, of course, we'll be able to sequence these all to red. That'll look really nice in terms of that regard. We'll get the nice little downfill red fill here at the top. And then you can see right here, we've got one LED strip and then another LED strip. So we've got two of those set up. Now, if I even want to, sometimes I like adding like a little kind of ambient fill. So what I might even do is included with the code is we actually give you an Aura extension RGB cable, which is pretty cool. And this code board actually gives you multiple RGB headers. So there's one actually right up here at the top that I could connect a cable to and then run that and then maybe put like an LED strip inside here where you don't see it and it kind of gives me a little bit of a flood fill right there just to kind of give it, because once I seal this up, it's going to vacuum out all that and it's going to be dark, and so it's kind of going to give it that, I think, kind of cool little ambient fill to where you won't see it. But it might add a little bit of contrast to there. So seeing as everything's kicking on from here, that looks good. My next step is that while I have these fans routed to this back, I'm just gonna, like I said, sequence those out so you can see what that would look like if I was to run the fan extension card setup. But if not, if you guys were doing this type of build on your own, like I said, run those cables to the corresponding chassis fan headers to make sure that they're optimally set up.
All right, so everything looked like it was up and running.
Yeah, it looked pretty good. I mean, I could throw the monitor on there, you know, and double check this post. But like I said, for this part, we're not interested in fully really checking the post. Right now, we're just trying to make sure that we look good from basic kind of all the items powering on. Especially with a lot of these RGB fans, one of the kind of the challenges that you do have is that each one of these fans requires an in and an out cable to be routed. And those all have to be sequenced together, and then they go to a control hub, which we have here. So,
so that's for the LED lighting there.
Correct, and so that's kind of like a tricky part where it's good to be able to test that and make sure that actually everything all kicks on, because what you might find is that if you forgot to do like one of the ins and outs correctly or something like that, then you might not end up getting that to sequence on, right?
Right.
So we've had a couple questions online from Trijiv, who has his user profile picture is the ROG logo. He's asking, is the Poseidon 1080 Ti a binned GPU?
Yeah, actually, all OC-based graphics cards are technically a binned GPU. So what you're going to have in terms of the Poseidon, just like the Strix OC card, is they're binned because we have to actually bin through the GPU to find one that runs at an effective speed. I think Greg noted this earlier, but the Poseidon is actually clocked at the Strix OC speed.
Yeah.
So it's faster than the standard Strix. As such, it is a binned graphics card because we've actually had to sort through it to reach one that we 100% know runs at that frequency.
Now, one thing you were talking about before is overclocking. This is actually one of these things that from a user perspective, like an actual real world perspective, the software that's included with cards and motherboards to actually support overclocking, fan controls, LEDs. You know, a lot of people talk about features, but the actual, does the software crash? Is it usable? Matters a lot. And there goes the RAM.
At least we're not using that RAM. We already got the RAM.
That's just the G
The other RAM.
RGB. But for this card, it is overclockable. Once you get it on liquid or even air, you can do a number of different features. But what was interesting to me is the Onetouch GPU overclock.
Correct.
Would the scenario be that, say you take this and you hook it up to your loop, you one-touch it and you let that sucker run, and is it going to be just as easy as, say, the ASUS one-touch overclock for the CPU?
It's pretty close. I mean, the one-touch overclocking that we have built on the motherboards is very advanced. It actually has like a full automatic real-time stress test element. It's CPU specific. What we have in the one-touch option within GPU Tweak is a generalized preset that we've tested that does generally work, but it's not a guarantee. We've just tried to simplify the process so that if somebody wants an out-of-box overclock experience, they can just click that button and then they can apply that overclock and check to see that if it's stable. So it at least helps to streamline that. I mean, with the GTX 1080, NVIDIA has already very aggressively clocked the speed of this card. It's quite fast. So there's not necessarily as much margin in terms of total frequency like you might have like in a 1070 or something like that, where that can have few hundred megahertz of overclocking headroom within it. And that's the reason why, regardless of whether you buy a Strix or a Poseidon, you can't necessarily guarantee and say, hey, you're going to get another 200 megahertz. Because also keep in mind, as we showed in our stress testing, the boost clock that we have, because of the superior cooling, is actually ramping up to even higher speed, right? So like in the turbo, we were pegging at 1911, right? So a little bit over 1.9 gigahertz. While with some of the other cards like a Poseidon, it's running sustained at 2 gigahertz. So you're already getting a faster speed. So then you have to look at, then, do I want to overclock it even further, and how much more in that? I'd say,
even when we just put it with water cooling, it was running at 2025 kilohertz. So
and so, you know,
that's without even any overclock.
And for the 1080 Ti Founders edition, that's 35% faster than the 1080 version, and then we're looking at another 5% on top of that, if not more, for jumping up. So it's one of these things that's, people talk about overclocked CPUs, but these are out of the box already overclocked, then give you additional room to go even farther, which I think is kind of an interesting way to look at it compared to like CPUs, which you need to do a little bit more work. They don't, for example, Intel doesn't sell pre-overclocked CPUs. Right. That'd be interesting, but
well, I mean, they have like the turbo mode and things like that that help you get a little bit more performance, but it doesn't work in the same way. Right?
It would be interesting if ASUS binned CPUs and included them already pre-installed in motherboards. I
That would
wouldn't
be
opposed to
interesting.
that.
I wonder if we could talk to Intel about that.
Just a
AMD
different,
for that
different way
matter.
the industry works. Someone, Anon on YouTube is wondering, are blower style cards significantly louder?
Yes. Yeah, the decibel rating is significantly louder. I mean, in normal testing, we generally find that Strix cards can be in a factor of 2 to 3 times X quieter. Sound, it's the way that the actual decibel pattern works, it's quite a bit different. You know, it's a logarithmic in terms of how it's defined. So in terms of the decibel ratings, these are significantly quieter base cards. You also have to kind of factor that there's things that consider like tonal patterns that you have in terms of the way that the fans are designed. So with a blower-based fan, they tend to produce kind of a higher whirring sound, and that's inherent to
But they spin at a higher
design.
RPM, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like the Strix card or the Poseidon, because it's much smaller, so it's got to spin
Yep.
faster to move
Got
more
a lot
air,
of work,
right?
work
Yeah.
to do.
So there's a lot of characteristics that go into it that produce how the sound is influenced. So you are going to always have a significantly louder experience on a blower-based card. I mean, I would say on the Turbo, it's still not like horrendous, just like it's not horrendous on the Founders Edition. It's still, I'd say it's acceptable for most gamers. I think most enthusiasts, they'd be okay with the sound that's output by it. But definitely for somebody that, you know, like for me on one of my gaming desktops, I do have it directly on my desk, so it's right next to me. So I do like having our 0 dB operating mode, which means when the card's at, you know, 55 degrees or under, the fans don't even spin. Or when I'm under full gaming load, I barely hear the card because not only there's 3 of them and they're large, but they're running at a low RPM, so it's very quiet in terms of the operation.
Yeah.
So I've gone ahead and connected the fan extension card. So if you guys want to check this out, this is the way that it kind of look here. So you can see it's pretty simple. So I've got my 3 fan leads that are all running to this. I went and connected that to the board. So that would be in relation to now seeing these front 3 are all powered from this, right? And so then if I just wanted to connect these 2 fans, you would see right here, the ones that I have for the chassis, those goes to CPU optional, right? And then my rear exhaust fan would go to like
Just a
chassis
chassis
fan
fan,
if it heard
right.
1 or something like that.
So now using that board there, you have those 3 fans are all connected individually,
Yep.
but then that's connected to the motherboard on one.
On one single cable,
single.
yeah. And like
Okay.
I said, that becomes quite a bit easier because now I can
But
just
then in
tie
the
this all
UEFI,
together.
you can still see each one individually, right?
Correct, you got that. It actually will show up in the UEFI as something that says fan extension card, and you'll see EXT1, EXT2, and EXT3.
Okay.
Yep. So now this just requires 1 Molex. I'll pre-fire this and test it again. And you know, because there's a lot of cable routing mounting to go, I think what we'll do here, because we've got a fairly running system, is see if we can boot into our UEFI environment and see if we can look at some of those kind of parameters.
Sweet. And so one of the things with the differences of the cards, this is the new Poseidon 1080 Ti. When we were running some benchmarks in the earlier stream, the Founders card, or the Turbo card, was getting, the blower style, was getting around, what was it, 75, 85?
Oh, it was 85,
No,
85.
84.
84 degrees.
Yeah, up to about 84, which is pretty much about the same as the Founders Edition. It'll
Yeah.
pretty much get up to about that speed, and once it reaches 84, what the card is generally designated to do is it will keep kind of ratcheting up the fan curve to try to maintain that temperature. So that means that if it needs to go to like 75% fan, it'll do that. If it needs to go to 80% fan, it'll keep doing that to try to maintain that temperature.
And then the Strix Overclocked Edition, that's now in that build right there, that
Yeah.
was,
That was
what were the
about
temps on that?
65.
65.
Or
And then the
68,
Poseidon water-cooled, which we've got a little setup back there,
Was 45 or
so it
46.
went from 85 down to 45.
Yeah, a difference
Which
of
is-
40 degrees
And that's
Celsius.
Celsius, not American units.
Yeah,
So that's a pretty
world
good jump.
units.
So a question from Dribble is, what exactly are the EXT headers for?
EXT?
External fans.
On what? On the
Or-
card or?
No, on the motherboard.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the fan EXT header is just what we talked about, which is this guy right here. So that's going to be the fan
And
extension
that's
card.
that little 5-pin.
Yeah, correct. That's the cable that comes included
The white
with-
5-pin.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. It's this little cable. So when you see fan EXT on the motherboard, the only thing that could connect to that is this fan extension card. Now, fan EXT on our graphics card, that is those 2 4-pin traditional fan headers, which you could either run a PWM 4-pin fan or a DC 3-pin fan on the graphics card. So depending on what we're talking about, those are the 2 kind of points when we're talking about fan extension.
Now, some people are asking about, say, warranty and obviously modding. One question was if they buy the Strix and they paint it white or they paint the back plate, Does that void the warranty? What kind of room is there to move?
We actually discussed this with our product managers. So take, for instance, like on our motherboards, we started seeing users when we did tough motherboards that wanted to paint the shroud. We do allow for that, and it doesn't void the warranty. What we do, though, is that when you hand inspect the unit, this is always treated on a per cases basis. And what I mean by that is that some users take more caution than others. So if we receive the unit and we see that you might have inadvertently damaged the board in a way, like maybe you've nicked something or you've scratched something, then we will analyze that, and we will inform you that essentially there's been indirect damage that occurred on the board, and that would disqualify you for the RMA. But just by purely painting that, like let's say armor or something like that, that does not invalidate the warranty.
Remember, if you are painting, like even this motherboard here, take it off the motherboard before you paint it.
Correct.
So basically, the upshot is, if you've poked a screw or a screwdriver through the PCIe slot, it's your fault.
Yeah.
If it's something that's actually a defect with the motherboard, then that's covered under warranty.
Right.
Yeah, we try to be respectful and considerate of the fact, that modding is something that, a lot of us enjoy and appreciate, and I'd say it in a traditional fashion. I mean, because of course you got extreme modders that will do things that they totally know are voiding the warranty on a product. That's different. But if we're talking about kind of these more basic kind of traditional mods, they generally don't have any direct influence to damage the motherboard or the component that we're talking about.
I mean, this board here, the code, it does have a cover on it that you could take off and paint, right?
Yep, exactly.
This one, we have the what is it? The formula behind us.
Right.
There's also the extreme as well as obviously the tough.
Yeah, so you can.
R2.
Yeah, so you can take that plastic shrouds off, spray paint, and put it back on, and that shouldn't void the
Yeah, I've
warranty
been
at
really
all.
wanting to.
Unless you spray paint it while it was on there and damages something.
Some people do that. Actually, they tape up all the
Hey,
PCIe lanes.
if you could
and
tape
they
it off
all the
and
stuff.
do that,
But I assume that would just. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. All right, so where are we at, JJ? Do we need me to grab a monitor yet?
No, yeah, if you want to pull it out of there, that'll be fine.
We're gonna get this thing going soon.
Another question is, what about using Liquid Ultra on this GPU? Or if you know with that, Liquid Ultra.
Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of like premium different types of thermal compounds that are out there on the market. Some of them like pure silver. There's like Dragon. There's like the new Thermal Grizzly, and there's quite a number of them that are out there. There's nothing wrong with that, but actually this is true for thermal compounds from all types of devices you purchase. It's important to remember that the thermal compound material that comes with, like, let's say the CPU cooler or that's already on the graphics card has already been thermally bonded and validated by the manufacturer. So whatever temperatures you see that are tested, those were reached with that interface material. And we actually do quite a bit of testing to find items that have maintained their viscosity, that maintain good what's called thermal consistency, because when you go from like heat to cold, heat to cold, heat to cold, it can break down thermal interface material more quickly. So there's a lot of different considerations that we make. Now, if you want to spend your money and get like a really premium one and do it, I would say that it's not necessarily a bad choice, but don't necessarily think that you're going to get like 10 degrees. In my experience, we will generally see that there's usually about a 2 to maybe 3 degree delta. On this cooler design, though, because of that max contact finish where we have that super clean lap surface, there may actually be a little bit more benefit to having ultra high quality thermal interface material because of how good the efficiency is. One very important note, though, is that be very cautious with conductive materials, or essentially conductive interface materials. Not all thermal interface materials are non-conductive. That means that kind of when you're spreading it out, if you inadvertently spread it out into the wrong places on the board, you could actually potentially damage or shred something
if
up.
you connect a couple pins on the CPU slot or anything like that.
Yeah, somewhere you could damage something. So just be kind of cautionary. That's why a lot of vendors will recommend not just non-conductive interface materials.
It's the safest way to go. I've got a question on YouTube. We answered this maybe a little bit before. Was this the earlier stream? What about adding a water block to the ASUS Strix GPU? As you mentioned, that's the most popular card out there for custom aftermarket water blocks. Is it still covered under warranty? Is it the same principle? If you damage it, it's your fault? Does removing the fan and the...
No, you can entirely remove it, no problems. That doesn't actually void the warranty. Again, though, if you were to damage something, then when you receive the card, we will communicate that to you. But you buying like an EK or a Fantex or Thermaltake, Bits Power, whoever might be water block, is entirely supported. You can do that. and you can replace that on the card and you're okay. So it's just, be considerate and cautious when you go about doing the installation. But if you do supply the unit back for a general RMA, do keep in mind that we will require you that you have to send the entirety of it all put back together.
Yeah, I would say
you can't just send us the pure bare graphics card.
Right. I would say if it's your first time liquid cooling a GPU, just go for the Poseidon.
I mean, like we talked about, the Poseidon is going to be just a few bucks more expensive, a few bills more expensive. It's not, say, 120, 150 bucks for a custom water block. If you were to buy, say, the Strix, you're probably going to get equal performance as this is going with the Strix and then an aftermarket water block.
Yeah, I imagine the performance there wouldn't be a huge difference in performance.
And plus, then you get extra fans. And I bet you're getting extra performance.
We're going to have to test that. We're going to have to test that in a future video.
You want to drop me your Ethernet line here so I can download something here quickly. But you can see, guys, here from our test image that we've got on our primary NVMe SSD, we are actually able to post through, no problems. So far, actually, things are looking really good here. So what I'm going to try to quickly see if I can do is just at least download the CAM software to be able to run their synchronization options so that I can get these set to red. So see, we can start kind of getting that finalized look that we're looking for. And as you can imagine, kind of the last trend steps really here to finish off the build would be just kind of taking that time to really kind of cable route things. One thing that I do recommend is kind of a tip to people is that when you do go about cable routing, depending on how long term you kind of want to really keep your build, is be cautious on splicing, jumbling every single cable together. While it might be really easy from a perspective saying, oh, I want to cable route them all together, I would generally try to individually sequence certain cables to certain kind of certain sections. So like keep my fans all grouped together on one cable, keep my CPU and 24-pin power cable maybe grouped together, my PCI power cable. That makes it much easier so that as you change things over time, you upgrade, you want to pull certain cables, you're not pulling everything from one really big bunched up kind of cable interface. So next step here is I'm just gonna go ahead and download some software.
So we got a question, who made the water block for the Poseidon? You see some water blocks that are made by different people.
So that is all internally designed and developed by ASUS. That is our design and our development for that. It's unlike, let's say, some of the other products that we've co-worked on where we have like Bits Power who's worked with us on, take for instance, like our Maximus Extreme, or like EK who's worked with us.
This board behind us has the
Maximus
EK
formula.
in it,
Yeah, correct.
And then, here's a very specific one. What thickness do I need to use of thermal pads to replace warm pads for the Strix 1080 Ti?
That's, a good question. I'd have to double check on that. I don't know if it's 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter.
Yeah.
I don't think it's 0.5 millimeter in terms of the pad. I think it's probably a 1 millimeter pad, but I would actually have to check on that. I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question, when are we going to see the Poseidon Titan edition? Never.
Never.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah,
Can you discuss a little about that? What
it is
NVIDIA does?
NVIDIA right now currently with its add-in partners does not allow for the Titan series to be produced in a non-reference fashion. So from ASUS, the highest end parts that we will be able to offer you is going to be essentially a GeForce enabled products like the 1080 or the 1080 Ti or 1060 or things like that.
So the Titans are only available in the Founders Edition from NVIDIA.
Yeah, so don't send hate mail to Newegg or to ASUS. Let NVIDIA know that you want to see non-reference version Titans. And then, so Brandon on Facebook wants to know, at home, what do you guys use, air or water for your systems?
You want to go first?
Sure, I use water, but I'm using like closed loop solutions, kind of like the NZXT one we have here, but I'm using on the GPU. It's actually a bracket, so you can put a CPU cooler on the GPU. It's made by Corsair. It's a little older. It's called the HG10, and I've got that hooked up to like a H60 CPU cooler, but that cools the GPU, and then I have like a H100 on the CPU. So it's liquid cooling, but it's not custom.
So for me, it's I've got like
which system?
Yeah,
I got like 6 systems. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of different systems, but I do actually have 2 custom, full custom water cooling systems. So my primary, like highest end gaming system uses a full kind of complete EK series water cooling setup.
Is that, do you have like the water blocks for the GPU as well?
I have water blocks for everything. I have
Okay.
water blocks, full
Everything.
coverage water block for the motherboard, full coverage water block for the CPU, water block for the graphics card, so everything is cool.
The
I even
RAM?
have,
Do you have
I
a-
have blocks for the memory. So
Oh, really?
yeah, so
Okay.
it's pretty crazy. And then my testbed setups, actually I have quite a number of Exos systems. So that's Exos is what we used in our previous live streams. They're really nice external units that have pump, reservoir, radiator, and everything. So actually that allows me to kind of quickly go from like, you know, X99 to testing AMD to like,
Right.
so I can just quickly swap and it's really nice. So I have that type of water cooling setup. And then for my, kind of actually my primary daily driver system, there's been huge amount of improvements in closed loop water cooling solutions in terms of pump noise, but for the longest time I was really a stickler on really wanting to have very quiet systems. And actually my primary system that I use more than anything else is actually all fully air-based. So it's a Noctua cooling solution with a whole bunch of Noctua-based fan setups. I don't have any closed-loop water cooling systems, so it's either the custom or I favor traditional tower heatsink setups.
Nice.
I use the Intel
Very
stock
interesting.
cooler. That's
Oh,
what I
yeah?
do.
I thought they didn't come with those anymore.
I actually modded it to work on a
You just reused one of the old ones,
Broadwell
okay.
E, yeah, that's good.
So you got the one from your, you know, i5 2500K on your Broadwell E. That'll work.
Yeah, I'm on Core 2 Duo.
Yeah.
Um,
No, really, what kind of system do you have
I
at
go
home desktop?
I switch around. Well, because I review tons of components, so I'm
right, so
always
you-
swapping stuff. in
Yeah.
and
Oh, I
out.
guess your latest system is the Scooby-Doo
Yeah, just
Mystery
finished.
Mobile over
Yeah,
there.
that's kind of a work in progress over there.
Yeah.
So that actually is an alpha cool. It's a 240 millimeter system. It's on the Strix motherboard.
Yeah.
It's a Z270E. It has a 1070 or 1080 in it, but that's
It is a
temporary.
pretty cool system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I switched out the tubing on that thing with clear tubing. So because it
Right.
uses standard 1/4 inch fittings, so the Alpha Cool has the reservoir and the pump on the block or on the CPU, and then I've got some Mayhem's Aurora in there as well as the Aura Ready ASUS. Well, it's
The
G-Skill RAM.
Trident Z.
Trident Z.
Yeah,
RGB
Trident Z
RAM, yeah.
RGB.
So I haven't actually tweaked it with all the lights and everything. I actually just turned it on and it's kind of the stock lighting and it looks cool, but it's actually all
Yeah.
painted on the inside. So I hope
Yeah.
to actually mess around with the Aura software a little bit later
I know
on.
it's cool. It's got a great custom paint job, and I love like the wood paneling vinyl stickers on there.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Looks
come
cool.
up with a good name. I'm thinking like the hipster build or, yeah, I don't know. It'll take a
Maybe
little
if it
bit.
was actually built out of wood, that would be a good name.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be a challenge. I thought about it, but that'd be
Yeah.
a little much.
So you can see right here, I still need to do some more work in terms of getting some other we can see that I've already got the base Kraken software installed. So you see I was able to already set
Got the
that
red.
really nice display to the red.
And that's what I was talking about earlier. That little display on the front of that Noctua looks
Yeah,
really
it's,
great.
it's a very similar type of an Nvidia
Kraken.
display.
Did I say Noctua?
Yeah,
Kraken.
what NZXT has done here, right? So yeah, I'll continue kind of going through and see if I can get the Air series fans tuned here.
Yeah. So now, how is the RGB on those fans? How is that controlled? That's through that other controller you showed
Correct.
us earlier.
That's through the CAM software. So NZXT
Okay.
has their CAM software, which allows for monitoring of the system, as well as configuration to the Kraken X62 and to their Air series fans. So how we were, at the end of the day, this is similar actually to our Manta build in terms that we kind of have like a hybrid RGB experience here. We've got RGB from ASUS controlling the system lighting in terms of the LED strips, as well as the graphics card and the integrated motherboard lighting. And then, like I said, if I ran that optional LED strip from the motherboard on the inside here, that would all be controlled by ASUS Aura. And then, of course, for our keyboard and our mouse, because we're using the Claymore keyboard and the Gladius 2, these also support synchronization.
Actually, the Gladius 2 is brand new. I don't know if you guys can see that. Why don't you show it like from the side? It's got that that little ribbon of RGB around the outside. Right now it's kind of in party mode, so it's a little crazy, but you can set that up to be any color you like. I just kind of like it because it looks like it's hovering, but it's still kind of the same, similar design as our Gladius, but,
Correct,
but
yeah.
upgraded switches and more RGB lighting.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome mouse. If you're into FPS gaming, you like a really quick, responsive mouse and flexibility in terms of changing out the actual switches. And I really love the fact that you can remove the cable.
Yeah, detachable
so, yeah,
cable.
you've got two cables in there. You've got what we call the fly-by-wire cable, which is ultra light, so it doesn't restrict you if you're a really big gamer.
When
in
it's
terms of
shorter
moving
too,
back.
right?
It's a little bit, not
Yeah,
too much shorter.
okay.
It's still long enough, but
Yeah.
but it's super light. And then of course here you've got the braided cable, which does add some weight. So if you're somebody that wants that super quick fast responsiveness and you don't want to have any snapback, then that's an option there.
And actually on the keyboard, is that the keyboard that has the BIOS button?
Yes, so this,
I thought that was cool touch.
This is actually a very interesting keyboard because we are using it with an ROG motherboard. This will allow us to do a lot of specialized command options. So we have Onetouch overclocking, we can overclock the RAM, we can enable our ROG synchronization lighting options, we can enter into the BIOS directly, we can set custom macros. So
and they're all commands written out on the keyboard themselves.
yeah,
so
exactly.
it's
So
there, yeah.
it's great in terms of this is an awesome standalone mechanical gaming keyboard,
Let me turn it up. It shows the.
but you have the ability, of course, to be able to customize it a lot more completely if you wanted to.
Yeah, so the BIOS button is still the delete key, which makes sense, but it helps you see what.
Remember it. You don't have to wait and look at the
Exactly,
screen,
yeah.
and it just pops up for a second. Hit delete for BIOS or whatever.
Yeah, it's actually
It's
kind of understated. Not a lot of people know about that keyboard, but I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it has a detachable 10 key. Right now it's in 10 keyless mode. One of the cool things, I don't know if this is a feature that's enabled right now, but you can buy an additional 10 key and have 10 keys on both sides and set up one just for all macros.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, so
So you just have a bunch of extra macros. So it's kind of a cool feature.
That's cool. So I'll just run through a few questions online. If you're joining us, I'm Josh from Newegg. We've got JJ and Greg from ASUS over here talking about the new graphics cards. Poseidon 1080 Ti.
Yeah.
Question is, what is the metal? Is it mixed metals?
it's for the plate, which is the most important part. That's all copper, so you don't have to worry about any type of mixed metal kind of vibes or anything like that. So that's the important part in terms of what's going to be used for the water cooling component.
So here's a question from Justin. He has two Strix 1080 Ti's. Lucky. Looking to use the Fantex water blocks in comparison with the Poseidon Cool just as well. As the Strix with aftermarket blocks.
We talked about that. Very, very similar. With a full coverage water block, those Fantex, like I said, those are cool because he still gets the ASUS Aura RGB synchronization options.
Right.
And they look awesome. They're very, very clean looking blocks. The performance is going to be within a couple of C. So you could expect, I would clearly expect with a good quality, at least 2-fan radiator set to be mirroring similar temps. SLI is going to maybe bump a little bit more, but I would probably say he's looking at mid 40s.
Yeah, I mean, if money's not an object, which it kind of sounds like it is for
if
Justin.
you got two GTX 1080 Ti's, yeah.
Yeah, but so the trade-off, I mean, the custom, the Fantex blocks, look great.
Yeah.
But this also has like the mirror effect, which I'd love to plug in and actually show people. But it's kind of, what do you want to do? So the truth is, two Poseidons are going to be quite a bit cheaper actually than two Strix plus the water blocks.
Plus the time, of course.
Plus
also.
the time.
Yeah, I don't know about probably not quite a bit cheaper, but definitely a little less
Fantex
expensive.
blocks, like $150, something around there.
I think
I
it's
guess
around
something like
that.
that. Yeah, I guess that would be pretty. That's
so
$300 in blocks. But I mean, if you're an experienced builder, like I said, like JJ was saying, you also get the LED features that sync up with the Aura, and if you're an experienced builder, and you can put them closer together if you want, because they're not as thick. So it's a little bit space saving.
That don't really matter if you're using like a real custom case, like some of the Leon Lees that have, where you're going vertical, you're using risers, like the Thermaltakes, the PCIe risers. On any modern motherboard, you got, three units of spacing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so you're pretty safe.
At the end of the day, what we're mainly focusing on, though, is, of course, just making sure that we give you the flexibility. So the great thing is that he has that choice as a user. If he wants to go Strix and custom water blocks, Strix supports that because we work with the partners to have it. If you're a user that wants to be able to have an awesome out-of-box experience, go with the Poseidon.
Yeah, and also if he really wants the infinity mirror effect, I've got it up here on my computer if we can see that. If he really wants the infinity mirror effect, he can go with the Poseidon because that's just really cool. This is in the InWin 805 Infinity, and this is the GPU right here. You can see the Poseidon logo and the infinity mirror. It looks like it's a hollow GPU. It's pretty cool.
And JJ, what was the actual model name for people asking online of the mouse and the keyboard?
This is the ROG Gladius 2, and then for the keyboard, this is officially the ROG Claymore Core. So we have two versions that have now formally launched. We have them in Cherry MX Red and Cherry MX Brown. The complete ROG Claymore, which is actually just called the ROG Claymore, that one also comes with our what we call Bond 10 key keyboard. And this is it's a really nice.
So the Claymore core is 10 keyless.
10 keyless, correct, and then just Claymore includes the 10 key.
Okay.
And this one also has a fully removable cable that also comes included with it. And we might be doing actually an overview video, so you guys can check it out in the not too distant future if we do cover this. But some really cool stuff. You can definitely find out more by going over to our product page and checking out.
They're currently not sold on Newegg, but let us know.
Yes.
Are they?
Yes.
All right, well, drop us a comment if you want to see more about some of the ASUS peripherals. You know, a keyboard that's like the hardcore overclocking, or not even hardcore, but just PC builder centric is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So for some of the other questions about the card, to run down again, it's a 2 and a smidge slot size here. It is a similar backplate, actually identical backplate, other than it says Poseidon, to the Strix 1080 Ti.
Yeah, and they have the white ROG logo there, lights up.
Yeah, the RGB logo. This also has the same double 4-pin fan headers as well as the 12-volt RGB. So the 4-pin, which is actually pretty cool. On one of the builds that we
you
used,
hook up a couple of fans to it and run the fans directly from the GPU or an LED strip.
yeah, one of the things that a guy here likes to do is he likes to run LEDs, a strip across here to light up underneath through the CPU and the DIMMs. So it's much better. Also, just a little touch that I personally love about the ASUS boards is the RGB header up at the top of the motherboard.
Right.
Makes getting that roof lighting is something that was like, why wasn't this done before?
Yeah.
You know, why isn't everyone doing that? It's a little touch that makes a lot of sense, but I think now that you guys started doing it, we're going to see every board now have that.
Yeah, the boards, they usually have it on the top and the bottom if they've got two, and that just makes it just easier to route, you know?
Yeah.
Easier to route the cables, and they're out of the way, out of the view.
I mean, cable management's, we're now getting more and more in there. TryJiv again is asking, when will Magnus microphone be released?
That's a very good question. We actually have just formally finalized our internal release for this to get it out to distribution. So you will probably officially see it available sometime in early to mid-June. I would probably say it's going to be coming online. You can actually already see the product page up for it. It's so if you search for ROG Magnus, you'll be able to find out a lot more information on it. But definitely in the not too distant future, you'll be able to pick one up.
Sweet. So
I'm going to try one more thing here in terms of getting one more loop back to see if I can finish getting the Hue Plus lect in here so I can finish rerunning the cam software to hopefully detect this so I can set the colors. But pretty much at this point, we'd be just about done from the build. Like I said, it would be pretty much just finishing up the cable management, getting that back panel on, getting our primary panel on here, and from that point, you know, getting ready to probably overclock this, because with this type of system, I would be overclocking both my Strix and my
I mean,
my
that
CPU.
case has great airflow with the 3 intake fans on the front and on the top,
the great thing too with this motherboard is that it's got our auto tuning technology, so we would be able to have system specific auto overclocking, so specific to our CPU, specific to our cooling solution. We just touch it, overclock it, and we'd be rocking and rolling. So I'll try to see if we can do that and see if we get maybe the last couple of questions. And I think for most parts we've walked through, I think setting up a pretty cool RG certified build right here.
Well, I mean, one thing that that you have in there now.
I just had to do that just for you guys in case, you know, you.
Yeah, we got the window there too.
Just
if you
wanted it right there, you know.
But one thing, if you look on the inside, you've got the Mdot 2, and you can see how that's mounted there. Kind of had questions about how that was mounted vertically. I don't know if you can see that on camera.
I can point to it. It's a little bit hard
maybe
because it's a little
tilt
bit dark in there.
Maybe tilt it forward a little bit. Yeah, see it in there? So yeah, it just comes straight out from the motherboard. So that helps airflow to keep the Mdot 2 SSD nice and cool, and kind of keep it out of the way.
Sweet.
So, yeah, so it's looking good. So we're going to get the fans.
Yeah, I'm going to try to rerun this Hue Plus because the cam software isn't initializing that portion right there. So I'm just going to try to double check, make sure I got all those connections right. And
the joys of being live.
Yeah. So some of the other questions are the 1080 about the Poseidon. Is the block different from the 1080 Poseidon to the 980 Ti Poseidon?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I can show you some pictures here. Let me just get it queued up here before we.
We want to see your desktop.
Go
we want to see all your windows.
This actually isn't even my laptop. It's a brand new one, but.
Oh yeah, actually, someone called out and said, "Ooh, that's a nice looking." What is it, 701?
Oh yeah, I probably should mention this. This is the new GL 753. Is that what it is?
Is that
It's a 17-inch This has a GTX 1070 in it with, I believe, 16 gigs of RAM and a Core i7. So this is our newest laptop. It has kind of the newer design. Some of the older ones, like the GL702, was black and orange, like the Strix GL702. This is the GL.
Looks like it's a
7.5.
thinner design as well.
Yeah, well, it's thinner than the one you've got. You've got the G7.5 too.
I have a Das Boot, the boat as we call
Yeah,
it. It's huge.
that one's big, but that one's overclocked. It's pretty quick.
It is, yeah.
But this one has a similar color scheme with the titanium copper and the orange setup. So, but to get back to that gentleman's question, I've got a picture up here of the 980 Ti or the 980 Ti Poseidon on the right and the 1080 Poseidon on the left. And one of the key differences you'll see here is the orientation of the loop here. So you can see that where you connect the loop here, it's coming out horizontally, and then these are vertical. So the 1080 is much easier to do a SLI, and you can also see that the cooling unit here is quite a bit thicker. JJ, didn't you have the
huge,
numbers
yeah.
on how much thicker the radiator here was on the Poseidon compared to the old one?
For the Poseidon, actually, I'm not sure compared to the previous generation Poseidon.
Oh,
No
okay.
relation
Oh, yeah,
to
you were talking about
our Strix, our
Oh,
Strix
okay.
cards for that heatsink assembly. But I can say that the heatsink assembly in general, the entire direct H2O, as we call it, vapor chamber and water block design was entirely redesigned for this generation. So altogether, the card in some way, shape, or form, although the GPU doesn't exist for this long, has really been kind of almost a 2-year project. So it's been a very extensive amount of time for us to be able to redesign and offer something that aesthetically looks distinctive and different and matches with what we've done on the motherboards and our other graphics cards, while also improving on the performance and the usability of the product. And I think all the way around, it really is an awesome card.
And I haven't held the old Poseidon in a while, but this thing feels just considerably heavier. Like
It
this
is,
thing, everyone's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
this
I would
thing's
say
so
it's a
heavy.
little bit heavier than even the previous generation Poseidon, which did have definitely some weight to it.
So which brings me up to actually a point that is kind of a issue with the latest generation cards that are gigantic is GPU sag. This thing's heavy. What are your thoughts on GPU sag?
Actually, if you already looked at it in the previous installation and even the Strixon card that we have in here, this is a huge 2.5 slot card. It's larger than the GTX 1080 Ti, which is a very large card. And you'll see that there's actually almost very minimal sag. Part of that comes through is that how you learn how to design the card. And we've been doing this for a very long time, is that we take looks at how we align the back plate, how we relate the actual the distribution of the actual heatsink assembly. Everything is analyzed so that we can try to find the balance to be able to go ahead and offer a card that has better torsion resistance and overall better rigidity, so you can minimize that. Also, of course, our newer motherboards, which feature the ASUS safe slot design, have additional rigidity reinforcement across all 3 axes, so that gives it a little bit better likelihood to minimize any type of sag. But all the way around, even if you have a little bit of sag, it's not like it's going to damage anything. There's nothing that's going to be compromised. But if it super concerns you, then you can get I'm not sure if we have it. You can double check on Newegg if we do have it listed. But ASUS does produce something that's called our DIY kit, and it actually does feature a 3-level nice aluminum VGA brace stand. So you can put that on the inside of your chassis, you can level it out, you can slide it right underneath the GPU, and you can eliminate all of the sag. So it's a really cool little kit, comes with a whole bunch of machined bits, a really nice screwdriver. It's a cool little accessory kit that also includes a brace for your graphics card if you want it.
Does it come with stickers? More stickers?
No stickers.
No stickers.
So I actually misspoke earlier. This is the GL702 laptop. Sorry about that. 702. And that's the G752. So the 702
Yes.
is a bit thinner. This one's only 16 gigs of RAM, but it still has a Core i7 7700 HQ in it. So it's a little bit more portable. It has a much thinner bezel than that one, so it's almost the same footprint as like a 15-inch laptop, but it's got the 17-inch screen. Just wanted to clarify that up so my boss doesn't see this and be like, "How did you not know?"
Oh, he's watching. He's
I know.
watching. Yeah, one interesting thing going back to the safe slot, it's when you see motherboards, different brands, it feels like everything all of a sudden the marketing is so large with any new launch. The safe slot is actually kind of cool, and just it looks different. It's a different way that it's designed. I've seen some boards that'll go unnamed that just throw a metal shroud around the outside that's actually not connected to anything.
Correct.
So
It's
it's still
actually-
on the pins.
it's
meaning
almost
still gonna
more of
break.
like a visual.
I wouldn't say that it's
Exactly.
a fake design because there is some slight element of improving it, but our process is actually using an injection molding process where we actually integrate it within the entirety of the frame. So that's why when you look at our safe slot design, you'll see that it's actually inside the PCIe slot. And that actually, like I said, improves all axes of torsion resistance. So it was actually quite an extensive process. It's patent pending in terms of that design, as opposed to, like I said, where you'll see some other ones and it's just this shroud or shield that's around the PCIe slot.
And that's one of those things about ASUS, just from my personal opinion in using it. It's that a lot of the work and quality that goes into it, you don't necessarily see it in the sort of the most blingy way, but you know that it's there, and it matters for all sorts of scenarios. So if you're out there shopping, beware of some of the marketing hype that exists around certain things.
So a quick note for you guys, just I want to actually be able to finish this last part up because I need to show you, but I'll show you actually something that you guys might have questions on because we've seen them, and actually this was similar to what happened with our setup for the Manta build. So this is actually another accessory that's produced right here by NVXT, so this is their their hub. And the reason why this is required is because what we see is there's a lot of these type of devices that require multiple USB 2 interfaces. And so with more and more USB 3.0 and 3.1 being the standard that you now have internal headers, sometimes you don't have as many USB 2 internal headers. So this actually little adapter is required because we need to run this to a single USB 2 interface that's on the motherboard to give us more USB 2. Essentially because it's a hub, so that then we could run the Hue Plus, the Kraken X62, the air fan setup, so that we can have essentially all
so,
those.
so that runs to the USB 2.0 header on the motherboard.
On the motherboard,
and it's basically a splitter, so you can power a few different internal USB 2.0
more USB 2
components.
internal headers,
Okay.
exactly. And so we would need the actual primary input cable, which will then run to that USB 2. And then that would allow us to go ahead and run this. So then we'd have the full sync through for the Kraken and for the air fan so that it would be recognized to be able to complete the control. Once we would do that, essentially we would be finished off. But this, like I said, while it seems like a lot of work, and to some degree it is, again, I do want to reinforce, like I said, for the most optimal setups, here you can see this is the 4-pin CPU fan header setup. If you wanted to, you could go out and use this like option, but like I said, for anybody that's going about with these type of builds and you're buying an ASUS series board, definitely take the time to make sure to optimally set up the fan configurations. So, to recap in terms of how that would be set up for you guys that are just wondering, closed loop water cooling solution has 2 fans. That should go to the CPU and CPU optional header that's on the motherboard. Our intake fans that we have here on the front, 3 of them, those could go to the chassis fan headers. A secondary option outside of going directly to the chassis fan headers is you could use a PWM fan splitter cable on one of the fan headers and just set the fan header to PWM output, and that would work for PWM based fans. You could go and you'd be set. The third option, of course, because ASUS likes to give you a lot of options, is you could use the fan extension card, which we showed earlier. That is an optional accessory. You do have to purchase it, but it plugs in the motherboard, allows you to go ahead and plug up to 3 cards there. And you could also use this like a PWM splitter board. So there's actually another fan header that you see right here. This one could also go to a chassis fan header, set as PWM, and then those 3 fans would just be mirroring that input signal. So you got a lot of flexibility there. And then the last fan, of course, is the chassis fan, and usually we've got a header around here. That's usually for the chassis. Connect that, and you'd be good to go. And so that pretty much wraps up what we've got here in terms of that setup.
Alrighty.
Sweet. We'll answer one last question for kind of a little discussion going on YouTube about the size of desks and about some of the PCs that we have out here and having specifically a Asus Swift 34-inch curved. These are 7-foot desks.
Yeah. I can't
And
imagine
so these
having
are
anything
dining
less
tables.
than this in your house.
Exactly. No, it's true. My personal desk at home is a 7-foot dining table, and that's what we use around here, 7 or 8 feet.
Oh, really?
Like, that's a good size. Like, that gets you a lot of monitor space and
Yeah.
speakers and nice PCs. So IKEA's got them. Dining room, though. Dining room tables, not
Yeah.
office desks.
Yeah, I think it all depends. I think also if you want to run your chassis on your table. Some people, like if you don't want to look at your chassis, you're willing to put it underneath. That saves you space. Also,
That to me is a crime. I do not hide your PC.
It depends, like I had a huge TJ07. I still actually have a TJ07. Sometimes that's so big you might not want to have it actually in the front, so you might want to have it on the bottom. Also, somebody that had lived in an apartment, 600 square foot apartment, I realized the value of sometimes figuring out intelligently how you take advantage of small spaces. So, depending on your apartment, you might have considerations. Many ASUS monitors have base and mounting support. So what I liked doing is you would get yourself a nice monitor arm, even if you have a smaller table.
One that like clamps onto your desk.
Clamp it onto there, put this on the arm. You can now raise this up, put this all the way up against the wall so that doesn't take up any of the space for your desk. And now I get that even if it's a small 3-foot or 4-foot space for that table, now I can just have my keyboard and my mouse. I can push my speakers back, and I've got a really nice potted area without having to have space for this monitor and for this system. So, actually, I think, space is a very, very, very specific consideration based on the size of the person. I'm 6'2", just about. My needs are going to be different than Greg's needs. Are going to be different for your needs. And ergonomics, I would say, is my last point to that. Make sure that whatever you do feels comfortable to you, because you want to minimize on straining your muscles and tendons and issues and stuff like that. Repetitive injury is something that's very serious, and so take your ergonomics into consideration. Don't just do what looks good. Make sure do what feels good for your type of setup.
Yeah, I'd also recommend, I personally have my computer mounted on a shelf like this above my monitors. So, when you have an open with a window, I want to look at it, so I have it mounted up there so you can see
Makes it easy to route the cables or plug your Oculus in or whatever,
Yep.
Yeah,
and you can look at it all the time.
Yeah.
Sweet. So, is that everything you wanted to show? Are we?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I'm gonna, spend a little bit of time to try to see if I can button up a couple things. Maybe I'll show you guys some little photos after the fact. But for the most part, we've given you guys a good example of what I think a high-performance GTX 1080 system, would kind of be spec'd out like, and kind of look-wise would be working with. And overall, it's pretty awesome. I think what you can set up now.
Yeah,
that's cool. So for a few people that joined us just now. This is the Poseidon, and this is what is launching very soon on Newegg.com. It's the liquid-cooled and air-cooled graphics card, but this is the 1080 Ti Strix build that JJ put together with NZXT. So once again, thank you guys for dropping by. This is really exciting. There's a lot of people online who, if you are giving away these parts for free, they would happily take them off your hands.
Awesome.
Otherwise, check out unlocked.newegg.com for recaps of these streams, lists of the products that you saw here, and where to buy them on Newegg. So stick around, and we will see you next time.